Maid answers call in Chinese in front of billionaire boss. The next night Sophia Chen held the phone with trembling hands as words in Chinese flowed from her mouth with a fluency she hadn't expected after so many years. On the other end of the line, the familiar voice of her grandmother echoed urgently, describing problems that seemed impossible to solve. Michael Peterson stopped typing on his laptop and looked up over his glasses, watching his housekeeper with an expression of complete surprise. In 15 years running one of the largest import companies in the country, he never imagined the young woman who cleaned his home every day could speak the language that both fascinated and challenged him in his business. Nai nai wo jidao. Zaihen kunan dan shi woxian zai meikian, Sophia said into the phone, her voice heavy with distress. Michael remained still, trying to process what he had just heard. Not only did Sophia speak Chinese, but her pronunciation was perfect, almost native. This was impossible. How could a housekeeper from Pasadena master such a complex language? Yes, Grandma, I understand it's urgent, but I can't help right now, Sophia automatically translated as she hung up, unaware her employer was watching her intently. When she finally turned and met Michael's piercing gaze, she felt her blood run cold. She had completely forgotten where she was, lost in worry over her family's seemingly unsolvable problems. I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson. It was my grandmother, a family emergency, she murmured, quickly slipping her phone into her uniform pocket. Michael rose from his desk, walking slowly to where Sophia stood, still clutching the cleaning cloth. His expression was unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes, a curiosity she had never seen before. Sophia, how long have you worked here? He asked, his voice calm but carrying a new attentiveness. 3.5 years, sir, she replied, trying to maintain her composure as her heart raced unevenly. And in all that time you never mentioned you spoke Chinese. It wasn't a question but a statement that hung in the air like a silent accusation. Sophia lowered her eyes, feeling the weight of a secret she had carried for so long. I didn't think it was important for the job, Mr. Peterson. Not important? Michael almost smiled, but there was tension in his voice. Sophia, do you know my company has struggled for years to establish direct contracts with Chinese suppliers? That I lose millions because of the language barrier. The revelation hit Sophia like a punch to the gut. All these years cleaning his office, listening to his frustrating calls, seeing the failed contracts piled on his desk, she had never made the connection. Or maybe she had but chose to stay invisible, safe in her apparent simplicity. I didn't know you needed it so badly, she stammered. Michael returned to his desk but didn't sit. He stood, drumming his fingers on the dark wood, clearly processing something important. Tomorrow morning, before you start cleaning, I'd like to talk to you. Can you do that? Sophia nodded quickly, but inside, she felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath her feet. That night, on the crowded bus ride home, she couldn't stop thinking about Michael's expression. There was something there that unsettled her, a subtle shift she couldn't quite place. At home, in the small apartment she shared with her mother in East Side, Sophia found Mrs. Zhang waiting with a worried look. Her mother could always read her emotions before she even spoke. Did something happen at work? Asked Mrs. Zhang, serving the simple dinner of rice, beans, and fried eggs. Mom, Mr. Peterson heard me speaking Chinese today. Mrs. Zhang stopped stirring the beans in the pot and slowly turned to her daughter. And what did he say? He wants to talk to me tomorrow. I think he's going to fire me. Why would speaking Chinese be a reason to fire you? Sophia sighed deeply, feeling the weight of years of unspoken secrets. Because he doesn't know anything about my past, Mom, about what happened in China, about why we came back, about the problems with Grandma's family. Mrs. Zhang sat beside her daughter, holding her hands tenderly. Sweetheart, you were only 8 when we left Beijing. Nothing that happened there was your fault. But what if he finds out about Grandpa's troubles? What if he knows we left China because— Enough, Mrs. Zhang interrupted firmly. That was over 15 years ago. You can't carry this guilt forever. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. But Sophia couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake, replaying fragments of memories she'd tried to bury. The chaos at the Chinese company where her grandfather worked, the accusations, the rush to leave the country, the promise never to speak of that time again. The next morning, she arrived at Michael's apartment 15 minutes early, something she'd never done before. He greeted her in the living room, not the office as usual, and a cup of coffee waited for her on the coffee table. "Have a seat, please," Michael said, gesturing to the armchair across from the sofa where he settled. Sophia perched on the edge of the chair, hands clasped in her lap, bracing for the inevitable. "Sophia, I spent all night thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I've come to a surprising conclusion." She looked up, trying to read his expression. "I'd like to make you an offer. How would you feel about, in addition to your housekeeping duties, helping me with some translations and calls to China?" The offer was so unexpected, Sophia was sure she'd misheard. "Mr. Peterson, I don't understand." "It's simple. I'll pay you an extra $1,000 a month to assist me with Chinese communication. You'd keep your normal duties, but a few hours each week would be dedicated to business. $1,000, nearly half her current salary. With that money, she could help her grandmother in China, pay off some family debts, maybe even take the technical course she'd always dreamed of." "I accept," she said quickly, before he could change his mind. Michael smiled for the first time since she'd known him. "Great. We'll start today. I have an important call to Shanghai at 2 this afternoon." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of nerves and anticipation. Sophia cleaned the house with even more efficiency than usual, but her mind was entirely focused on the call she'd make in a few hours. At 2 sharp, Michael called her into the office. On the desk was a speakerphone and several papers scattered, with details about electronics. "The company is called Golden Dragon Tech. The contact is Mr. Lee. I need to negotiate an order for 5,000 tablets, but the last 3 attempts were a disaster," Michael explained. Sophia nodded, feeling the familiar surge of confidence that always came when she spoke Chinese, as if a dormant part of her awoke. The call began formally, but soon Sophia sensed something was off. Mr. Lee seemed evasive, giving vague answers about timelines and product quality. Her time in China, however traumatic, had taught her to recognize when someone was hiding something. "Mr. Lee is saying the tablets will be ready in 2 weeks, but from the way he's speaking, I think he's not certain," Sophia whispered to Michael, covering the microphone. "What do you mean?" "In Chinese culture, when someone uses certain words, it means they have doubts, but don't want to appear incapable. Let me try a different approach." Sophia returned to the phone and, to Michael's surprise, completely changed the tone of the conversation. She began talking about seemingly random topics: the weather in Shanghai, traditional festivals, even Chinese food. Michael watched her, confused, but noticed Mr. Lee's voice became more relaxed, more natural. After 15 minutes of this seemingly purposeless talk, Sophia finally returned to business. But now Mr. Lee was far more open and honest. He revealed he was having issues with a battery supplier, and the actual deadline would be 6 weeks, not 2. When she hung up, Michael looked at her with genuine admiration. "How did you know to do that?" "My grandfather always said that in China, business is done between people, not companies. First, you need to create a human connection." Michael fell silent for a few seconds, clearly impressed. "Sophia, I think I severely underestimated your skills." In the following days, Michael began including Sophia in other calls and video meetings with Chinese business people. She didn't just translate, she offered cultural insights Michael had never considered. She explained why certain proposals were met with coldness, suggested modifications to approaches, even recommended appropriate gifts to send to business partners. Within 2 weeks, Michael closed 3 deals he'd been trying to secure for months. The company saw a significant revenue increase, and others in the industry started asking about his secret to handling Chinese suppliers. But success brought unexpected problems. Other employees began questioning why a domestic worker was involved in important meetings. Some American clients made unpleasant remarks about Michael trusting too much in a low-level employee. Jennifer Davis, Michael's executive secretary of 8 years, was the first to openly express her dissatisfaction. "Mr. Peterson, with all due respect, Don't you think it's strange for a domestic worker to be part of such important company decisions? Michael was signing documents and looked up at Jennifer with an expression she knew well, the same look he gave when someone questioned his business decisions. Jennifer, Sophia has produced more results in 2 weeks than we've managed in 2 years trying to expand into the Chinese market. But sir, what about company hierarchy? The other employees are talking. Let them talk. The results speak for themselves. But internal resistance was just the beginning of their problems. During a video meeting with a major supplier from Shenzhen, something unexpected happened. The Chinese businessman, Mr. Zhao, interrupted the negotiation mid-sentence and said something that made Sophia instantly pale. "Excuse me for a moment," she told Michael, muting the call. "I need to leave the meeting." "Why? What happened?" He recognized my last name. He's asking if I'm related to Chen Wei." Michael didn't grasp the gravity of the situation, but saw Sophia was visibly shaken. "Who is Chen Wei?" "He's my grandfather. Mr. Peterson, I need to explain some things about my family I've never told you before." Michael put the meeting on hold and turned to give Sophia his full attention. "My grandfather, David Chen, worked in China for 10 years as an engineer. He took the Chinese name Wei because it was easier for his colleagues to pronounce. But 15 years ago, there was a misunderstanding at his company." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Sophia took a deep breath, preparing to reveal a secret she had carried for so long. "He was accused of leaking industrial designs to competitors. It was never proven, but the situation became so difficult that our family had to leave China quickly." Michael felt as if he had been punched in the gut. His business mind immediately began calculating the potential risks. "And do you think this Mr. Zhao knows about this story?" "Mr. Peterson, in China, family reputation is very important. If he makes the connection, he could not only cancel this contract, but spread information that harms all your other Chinese business dealings." The realization of the gravity of the situation hit Michael like an icy wave. In just 2 weeks, he had built a solid business foundation in China, and now it could all crumble because of something that happened 15 years ago. "What do you suggest we do?" "We could cancel this meeting and try working only with other suppliers who don't know my family's history." Michael looked at the computer screen where Mr. Zhao waited patiently for the meeting to resume. He was one of China's largest electronic component suppliers, and losing this contract would mean giving up significant profits. "No," he said finally. "We'll face this head on. If your family was wronged, we won't let it keep hurting you." Sophia looked at him with surprise and gratitude, but also fear. "Mr. Peterson, you don't understand. In China, even suspicions can destroy reputations forever. Then we'll clear up those suspicions." Michael reactivated the meeting and asked Sophia to translate a message he dictated with firmness and diplomacy. He explained that he knew David Chen's story, had personally investigated the case, and had complete confidence in the family's integrity. More than that, he offered references from other American businessmen who had worked with David Chen after his return from the United States. Mr. Zhao listened quietly, occasionally asking specific questions that Sophia translated precisely. After 40 tense minutes of discussion, he requested 3 days to consult the right people before continuing negotiations. When the meeting ended, Michael and Sophia sat in silence for several minutes, each processing what had happened. "I'm sorry for putting your business at risk," Sophia finally said, her voice trembling. "You did nothing wrong. Your family did nothing wrong. We won't let past injustices dictate our future." But over the next 3 weeks, the situation grew far more complicated than Michael had anticipated. Other Chinese suppliers began discreetly asking about Sophia and her family. Some nearly finalized deals were put on hold for further review. Paranoia seeped into the business relationships they had worked so hard to build. Jennifer, the executive secretary, seized the opportunity to intensify her campaign against Sophia's presence in important meetings. "I warned you this would cause trouble," she told Michael during a private meeting. "Now the entire expansion strategy for China is at risk because of her. Jennifer, Sophia isn't to blame for her family's past issues. but she is to blame for not disclosing this sooner. Mr. Peterson, if clients find out we're working with someone linked to scandals in China... Michael cut her off with a firm gesture. Enough. Sophia will continue working with me, period. But deep down, Michael was also beginning to question his decision. The company was losing money, and he had responsibilities to other employees and investors. Had he been reckless in making such a quick decision based solely on his personal feelings? That night, Sophia called her mother, pouring out her heart about the situation that seemed to be spiraling out of control. "Mum, I think I need to quit. I'm causing too many problems for Mr. Peterson." "Sweetheart, you can't run away every time things get tough. Your grandfather fled China because he had no choice, but you do. What choice do I have? If I stay, I might destroy his company." Mrs. Zhang fell silent for a few seconds before asking a question that completely shifted Sophia's perspective. "What if you could prove your grandfather's innocence?" "How?" "That was 15 years. Her mum, and in China. Your grandfather kept all the documents from that time, every letter, every project, every piece of evidence that there was no leak. It's all here at home, in a box he never wanted to open." Sophia felt her heart race. All these years, it had never occurred to her that the solution might be so close. Why did he never try to defend himself with those documents? Because back then, no one wanted to listen. And later, when we returned to the United States, he said it was better to forget and start over. The next morning, Sophia arrived at work with a different proposal for Michael. "Mr. Peterson, I'd like to travel to China." He looked at her, as if she'd lost her mind. "Sophia, I think that's the exact opposite of what we should do right now. Not to run away, but to face it. My grandfather has documents that can prove his innocence. If I can clear my family's name, maybe we can regain the supplier's trust." Michael examined the proposal from every angle. It was risky, expensive, and could end in complete failure. But it was also the only real chance to solve the problem at its root. "How much do you think this trip would cost?" "I don't know, Mr. Peterson. I've never traveled outside the United States on my own." "And how do you plan to find the right people in China? How will you prove something that happened so long ago?" Sophia admitted she didn't have a detailed plan, only the conviction that she had to try. "Mr. Peterson, I know it's a huge risk. If you'd prefer, I can leave the company now and handle this on my own." Michael studied Sophia for several minutes, seeing the determination in her eyes. It was the same determination he recognized in himself when facing seemingly impossible business challenges. "No. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. I'm coming with you." Michael's decision to accompany Sophia on the trip to China sent shockwaves through the company. Jennifer was furious, other employees were confused, and some American clients began questioning whether Michael was making rational decisions. "Mr. Peterson, with all due respect, but spending company money to solve an employee's personal problems, that makes no business sense," Jennifer argued during a tense meeting. "Jennifer, this isn't just about Sophia anymore. It's about our company's credibility in the Chinese market. If we don't resolve this, we'll lose every contract we've secured." "But what if the trip doesn't solve anything? What if things get even worse?" Michael acknowledged these were real risks, but his mind was made up. Preparing for the trip took 2 weeks and revealed more challenges than Michael had anticipated. First, the cost. Flights, lodging, translators, and domestic travel expenses in China added up to nearly $20,000. Second, the logistics. Neither Michael nor Sophia had any experience with China's current bureaucracy. Third, the strategy. Even if they found evidence of Sophia Chen's grandfather's innocence, how would they convince influential business people to revisit judgments made 15 years ago? But the biggest obstacle appeared 3 days before the trip. Mr. Zhao, the businessman who had recognized Sophia's family name, personally called Michael with an unexpected and disturbing proposal. "Mr. Peterson," he said through Sophia, who translated with visible discomfort, "I can forget this whole Chen family story if you give me exclusive supply rights for 5 years with prices 15% below the competition." The offer was obviously a veiled blackmail. Michael stayed silent for several seconds, feeling anger rise within him. "Tell him we don't do business under coercion," Michael replied firmly. When Sophia translated the response, Mr. Zhao laughed unpleasantly and said something that made Sophia turn pale. "What did he say?" Michael asked. "He said that if we don't accept the offer, he'll make sure no reputable company in China works with us, and that he has enough connections to make it happen." Michael felt like he was facing a school bully, only now the playground was the billion-dollar international market. "Tell him our answer is no and that we'll be in China next week to settle this in person." After Michael hung up, Sophia stayed silent for a long time, clearly shaken. "Mr. Peterson, I don't think we should go. That man really has a lot of influence in China. If he wants to harm us, Sophia, if we give in to blackmail now, he'll have power over us forever. It's better to face it head on." But that night, Michael struggled to sleep. He was risking much more than just money. He was risking the entire company's reputation on a gamble that could go completely wrong. On the day of the trip, Mrs. Zhang accompanied Sophia to the airport, carrying an old suitcase that had belonged to Sophia's grandfather. "Everything's here, my dear," she said, handing over the suitcase with trembling hands. "All the documents, all the correspondence, all the projects. Your grandfather always said the truth would matter one day." Sophia hugged her mother, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "What if I fail, Mum? What if all this is for nothing? At least you'll have tried. That's what matters." The flight to Beijing took nearly 20 hours, with a layover in London. During the trip, Michael and Sophia reviewed all the documents from her grandfather's suitcase. There were technical projects, correspondence with colleagues, activity, reports, even written praise from supervisors, all meticulously organized and dated. "Your grandfather was very organized," Michael remarked, examining an industrial cooling system design. "He always said that in engineering, the details make the difference between success and failure." The more Michael examined the documents, the more convinced he became that David Chen had been the victim of an injustice. The projects clearly showed he had worked in entirely different areas from where the alleged leak had occurred. The dates on the correspondence proved he was on a business trip during the critical period when the leak supposedly happened. "Sophia, with these documents, it should be easy to prove your grandfather's innocence." "Then why didn't anyone want to listen back then?" Michael knew the answer, even if he didn't want to admit it. Sometimes, when a company needs a scapegoat for a bigger problem, the truth becomes less important than the need to blame someone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. They arrived in Beijing on a cold September morning, and Sophia felt a strange mix of nostalgia and anxiety as she heard Mandarin spoken everywhere once again. 15 years had passed since she last set foot on Chinese soil, and everything seemed both familiar and completely different at the same time. The hotel where they stayed was in the Chaoyang financial district, and Michael had scheduled 3 meetings for the coming days. One with representatives from the old company where Sophia's grandfather had worked, another with a lawyer specializing in commercial disputes, and a third with a journalist who had covered similar cases at the time. But on the very first morning, they discovered the situation would be far more complicated than they had imagined. The old company where David Chen had worked had been sold and split into 3 different businesses. The old records were scattered. Many employees from that time no longer worked in the industry, and some information had simply disappeared during the reorganizations. The lawyer, Mr. Liu, was brutally honest about their prospects. "Cases from 15 years ago are very difficult to revisit," he explained through Sophia, who translated for Michael, "especially when they involve suspicions of industrial espionage. Even if you have solid evidence, many people prefer not to get involved." "But if the documents prove my grandfather is innocent?" Sophia insisted. "The documents are important, but they're not enough. You need witnesses, influential people willing to support you publicly." Michael began to realize they had vastly underestimated the complexity of the situation. Having the truth wasn't enough. They had to navigate a complex web of relationships, hierarchies, and cultural sensitivities. The second meeting brought even more discouraging news. The journalist, Mr. Zhao, revealed information Sophia and her family had never known. Your grandfather's case wasn't isolated, he said. At that time, there was political pressure to identify technology leaks. Several foreigners were accused, some with evidence, others without. The government wanted to show it was being strict. Are you saying my grandfather was a scapegoat? Sophia asked. I can't say that officially, but let's just say not all cases from that time were investigated as thoroughly as they should have been. Michael felt a mix of anger and sadness, realizing that David Chen and his family had been sacrificed for political games far beyond their control. So now what? How do we overturn an injustice from 15 years ago? Mr. Zhao was thoughtful for a few minutes before answering. You need to find someone from your grandfather's old team who's willing to speak up. Someone with credibility, who knew his work well. Where do we find these people? That's going to be the hardest part. Many may be afraid to get involved, others may have moved cities or even changed careers. That night at the hotel, Michael and Sophia felt like they were trying to solve a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. Mr. Peterson, I think we should go back to the United States. This is more complicated than we thought. No, we came all this way. We'll try everything before giving up. But Michael was also starting to question whether his decision had been wise. They had spent a lot of money, lost important workdays, and so far had nothing concrete to show for it. On the third day, something unexpected happened. While reviewing old documents at a university library, an elderly woman approached them and said something in Mandarin to Sophia. She's asking if we're related to Chen Wei. Sophia translated for Michael. The woman was a retired engineering professor and had worked at the same company as Sophia's grandfather. Her name was Professor Zhang, no relation to the businessman with the same last name, and she remembered David Chen very well. Your grandfather was a very honest man, she said through Sophia. When all that mess happened, many of us knew he couldn't have done it, but no one had the courage to speak up. Why not? Asked Michael. Because back then, questioning the company's decisions could cost us our jobs, and because some of us were also foreigners or had foreign colleagues, we were afraid. We'd be next. Professor Zhang revealed crucial information that completely changed the perspective of the case. The real leak had been discovered years later, when a Chinese employee was caught selling information to competitors. But by then, David Chen was already in the United States, and the company preferred not to revisit old cases to avoid admitting mistakes. Do you have proof of this? Asked Sophia, barely able to contain her emotion. I have some documents I kept from that time, internal correspondence showing there were suspicions about other people. I never knew what to do with them. For the first time since arriving in China, Michael felt a surge of hope. Would you be willing to help us officially? Maybe speak to some of the people who questioned Sophia about this story? Professor Zhang hesitated for a few seconds. This could be dangerous for me. Even retired, I still have ties to academic institutions. We completely understand, said Michael. We don't want to harm anyone. But Professor Zhang surprised them both with her next words. Do you know why I approached you today? Sophia shook her head. Because I've always felt guilty for not defending your grandfather back then, and because an injustice from 15 years ago is still hurting an innocent family. Professor Zhang agreed to help them, but with specific conditions. First, she wanted to review all the documents they'd brought from the United States to be sure they truly proved David Chen's innocence. Second, she would only speak to specific people, those she knew well and trusted. Third, everything would be done discreetly, without public attention. The next 5 days were an emotional roller coaster. Professor Zhang managed to locate 3 of David Chen's former colleagues who agreed to examine the evidence. 2 of them confirmed they'd always doubted his guilt, and 1 revealed they'd overheard suspicious conversations involving the person truly responsible for the leak. But just when it seemed they finally had enough evidence, a new obstacle arose. Mr. Zhao, the businessman who had blackmailed Michael, discovered they were in China and began spreading rumors that they were trying to revisit old cases to cover up past wrongdoing. The situation grew so tense that Professor Zhang called Sophia. In a panic. Some people are questioning why I'm helping you. They say it could damage my reputation at the university. Professor, "If this is getting dangerous for you, we'll understand if you want to stop," said Sophia, though her heart was breaking. "No, now that we've started, we'll finish, but we'll have to be even more careful." Michael realized they were caught in a battle that went far beyond simple business matters. It was a fight between forces that wanted to maintain the status quo and others seeking justice and truth. During a secret meeting at a small restaurant in the suburbs of Beijing, Professor Zhang laid out her strategy. "I've managed to contact Mr. Tang, who was your grandfather's direct supervisor. He now holds an important position at a state-owned company and has enough credibility to influence opinions." "Has he agreed to meet with us?" asked Michael. "Yes, but he has one condition. He wants to see all the evidence first and will only get involved if he's completely convinced of your grandfather's innocence." The meeting with Mr. Tang was scheduled for the next day at his office in the Xicheng district. He was a man in his 60s, stern in appearance but with kind eyes, who received Michael and Sophia with formal courtesy. For 3 hours, they presented all the documents, all the correspondence, all the evidence they had gathered. Mr. Tang examined each paper with meticulous care, asking specific questions and verifying dates and technical details. "These documents are very convincing," he finally said. "And I remember your grandfather well. He was a man of strong principles." "Can you help us?" Sophia asked, barely hiding her anxiety. "I can, but not in the way you expect." Mr. Tang explained that he couldn't make public statements or directly confront influential people like Mr. Zhao. But he could do something subtler and potentially more effective. "I can discreetly circulate this information among the right people, plant doubts about the original accusations, suggest that perhaps it's time to revisit some old judgments." "How long would this take?" Michael asked. "A few weeks, maybe a few months. Shifts in opinion in China take time, especially on delicate matters." Michael felt a mix of hope and frustration. On one hand, they finally had a powerful ally willing to help. On the other, the process would be long and uncertain, with no guarantees of success. "Mr. Tang, what do you suggest we do in the meantime?" "Return to the United States and continue your business as usual. I'll work here, and in a few weeks you may have positive news." On the eve of their return trip, Michael and Sophia took one last walk through the Forbidden City. The place was crowded with tourists, but somehow they found moments of quiet among the ancient courtyards and majestic structures. "Mr. Peterson, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me and my family," Sophia said as they watched the sun set over the red rooftops. "There's no need to thank me, we did what was right. But what if it doesn't work? What if Mr. Tang can't change anything?" Michael stopped walking and turned to Sophia. "Then at least we tried, and we've learned that your family has nothing to be ashamed of." The flight back to the United States was quieter than the outbound one. Both were physically and emotionally exhausted, but they also felt they had done something important, regardless of the final outcome. Back in New York City, Michael faced a storm of criticism within his own company. Jennifer had taken advantage of his absence to sow doubts about his leadership among other employees and some clients. "Mr. Peterson, during your absence, 3. Clients questioned whether our company is stable," she said during the first meeting after his return. "And some employees are concerned about the costs of this trip." "The costs were justified by the results we obtained," Michael replied, though he knew the results were still uncertain. "What results? You came back with no new contracts, no guarantees that the problems were resolved." Michael admitted to himself that Jennifer wasn't entirely wrong. The trip had been expensive, risky, and had yet to produce tangible benefits for the company. Over the next few weeks, the situation grew even more complicated. Mr. Zhao, apparently irritated by Michael and Sophia's trip to China, launched a more aggressive campaign to damage their reputation in the Chinese market. 2 companies that had been negotiating contracts cancelled discussions for further review. A 3rd company simply stopped returning calls. Sophia began to feel guilty about the problems her family situation was causing. "Mr. Peterson, I think I should leave the company. As long as I'm here, these issues will keep happening." "Sophia, we won't let intimidation and blackmail dictate our decisions." But deep down, Michael was starting to question whether his stance was sustainable. The company was losing money, employees were restless, and he wasn't sure when or if Mr. Tang's help would yield results. 3 weeks after returning from China, something happened that completely changed the course of the situation. Michael received a call from a Chinese businessman he'd never contacted before. "Mr. Peterson, my name is Yang Ming, President of Pacific Trade Corporation. I'd like to discuss business opportunities." Sophia translated the conversation, but looked visibly confused. "Mr. Peterson, this company is one of China's largest trading firms. Why would they be reaching out to us now?" During the call, it became clear that Mr. Yang Ming had heard about their trip to China and the documents they had presented. More importantly, he had spoken with Mr. Tang and was impressed by the evidence proving Sophia's grandfather's innocence. "Mr. Peterson, our company values partners with integrity and strong principles. We believe you've demonstrated these qualities. Pacific Trade Corporation not only offered a substantial contract, but also suggested introducing Michael and Sophia to other Chinese business leaders who valued ethics in commerce." "How did this happen so quickly?" Michael asked Sophia after the call. "Mr. Peterson, in China, when someone as respected as Mr. Tang recommends you, word spreads fast in the right circles. In the following weeks, the situation completely reversed. Instead of doors closing, new opportunities began to emerge. Chinese business people who had never heard of Michael's company started reaching out, eager to work with a US firm that had shown courage and principles by defending an unfairly maligned family. Mr. Zhao, realizing his campaign was failing, made one last desperate move. He called Michael directly with what seemed like a generous offer. "Mr. Peterson, I was thinking perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. How about we forget past misunderstandings and start a profitable partnership?" Michael glanced at Sophia, who translated with barely concealed disdain. "Tell him we're not interested in partnerships with people who use blackmail as a business strategy." When Sophia relayed the response, Mr. Zhao fell silent for several seconds before hanging up without a word. "Do you think he'll try to harm us in other ways?" Sophia asked. "Probably, but now we have enough allies to protect us." Indeed, the network they had built in China proved more powerful than Michael had imagined. When negative rumors about the company surfaced, other voices quickly rose to defend them. Mr. Tang, keeping his promise, had worked discreetly but effectively to restore Sophia's family's reputation. 6 months after the trip to China, Michael was invited to a meeting with investors interested in expanding the company. The strategy of ethical business and strong relationships had caught the domestic market's attention. "Mr. Peterson, your results in China are impressive," said the lead investor. "How did you build so many solid partnerships in such a short time?" "Investing in the right people and standing by the right principles," replied Michael, looking at Sophia, who was attending the meeting as the international relations manager. Sophia's promotion had been a natural decision. Her language skills, cultural knowledge, and insights into Chinese business had become invaluable to the company. More importantly, her personal story had become an asset. Chinese entrepreneurs respected the courage she had shown in confronting past injustices. Jennifer, realizing she had bet on the wrong side of the situation, tried to reconnect with Michael and Sophia. "Mr. Peterson, I wanted to apologize for some of the things I said during that difficult time. I was worried about the company, but I admit I didn't fully understand the situation." Michael accepted the apology, but made it clear he would no longer tolerate attempts to sabotage Sophia or question her decisions based on prejudice. "Jennifer, in this company, we judge people by their character and competence, not by their background or former social standing." A year after the trip to China, Michael and Sophia received an unexpected call from Professor Zhang. She had news neither of them had anticipated. "Your grandfather's case has been officially reviewed," she said via video conference. "The company he worked for issued a statement acknowledging there wasn't enough evidence for the original accusations." Sophia began to cry, feeling a weight she had carried for 15 years finally lifting from her shoulders. "Does this mean his name has been cleared?" "Yes. And more than that, some of the people involved in the original accusations have formally apologized." Michael watched Sophia process the news with a mix of joy, relief, and sadness. Justice had finally come, but unfortunately, her grandfather had passed away 2 years earlier without seeing his reputation restored. That evening, Sophia called her mother to share the news. "Mum, Grandpa's name has been cleared officially." Mrs. Zhang cried for several minutes before she could speak. "He always knew the truth would come out one day. He used to say, 'Good people recognize other good people.'" "Mom, Mr. Peterson wants to talk to you." Michael took the phone and spoke with Mrs. Zhang for the first time since meeting Sophia. "Mrs. Zhang, your daughter is one of the bravest and most principled people I've ever known, and now I see where she got those qualities. Mr. Peterson, my family will never forget what you've done for us. You didn't just give us work, you gave us our dignity back." 2 years later, Michael's company had become one of the leading importers of Chinese products in the southeastern United States. Sophia had been promoted to Director of International Operations, and her story had spread throughout the industry as an example of how ethics and courage in business could yield extraordinary results. During a foreign trade convention in New York City, Michael was invited to give a talk on building commercial bridges with China. In the audience were dozens of entrepreneurs eager to learn from his success. "The secret to doing business in China isn't language, though it helps a lot," Michael said during his presentation. "The secret is understanding that business is done between people, and people respect integrity, courage, and loyalty." Sophia was in the audience, now wearing an elegant suit instead of a maid's uniform, but still with the same determined smile Michael had come to admire. 3 years ago," Michael continued, "I thought I knew everything about business, but it was a courageous employee who taught me the most important lessons, that standing up for what's right is worth more than any profit, and that investing in the right people always brings unexpected returns." After the lecture, several business owners approached Michael and Sophia, interested in consulting about Chinese markets. Some wanted to hire their company's services, while others wanted to learn about the methodology they had developed. "Have you ever thought about writing a book about these experiences?" asked a textile industry executive. Michael and Sophia exchanged glances, considering the idea for the first time. "Maybe," said Sophia. "Our story could help others facing similar situations." That evening, during the convention's closing dinner, Michael received a call neither of them expected. It was Mr. Tang from China. "Mr. Peterson, I have an interesting proposal for you," he said through Sophia, who translated with growing excitement. The proposal was ambitious. Mr. Tang wanted to invite them to open a representative office in Beijing, serving as a bridge between American and Chinese business owners. It would be a significant expansion, but also official recognition that they had earned respect and trust in the Chinese market. "This is an incredible opportunity," Michael told Sophia, "but it's also a big risk and a huge responsibility. Mr. Peterson, 3 years ago, you risked the entire company to defend my family. Compared to that, this risk seems small." The decision to accept the offer came after weeks of careful planning. Michael would keep the main operations in the United States, while Sophia would spend 6 months a year in China, managing the Beijing office and developing new business relationships. The office opening ceremony in Beijing took place on a sunny spring morning, attended by several key figures in bilateral trade. Mr. Tang gave an emotional speech about how courage and integrity had turned an initial misunderstanding into a lasting partnership. "This company doesn't just import products from China," he said. "It imports trust, respect, and friendship between our peoples." Sophia, now as fluent in Chinese as in English, responded with words that moved the audience. 3 years ago, I was just a housekeeper, afraid to reveal my past. Today I'm here because someone believed doing the right thing is worth more than any temporary profit. This company represents more than business. It's proof that strong principles always win in the end." During the reception after the ceremony, a young Chinese entrepreneur approached Sophia with a question that made her reflect on how far they'd come. "Ms. Chen, how did you manage to turn such a difficult situation into so much success?" Sophia thought for a few seconds before answering. "It wasn't easy, and there were moments we thought all was lost. But we learned that when you have a just cause and the right people by your side, you can overcome any obstacle." "And what was the hardest moment?" When we realized the truth alone wasn't enough, we needed the courage to stand by it even when it seemed impossible. The young entrepreneur nodded, clearly inspired by the story. You're an example to all of us trying to do ethical business in a sometimes complicated world. That night, Michael and Sophia dined at a traditional Beijing restaurant, celebrating not just the office opening, but the entire journey that had brought them there. Sophia, do you have any idea how much your life has changed in the last 3 years? Mr. Peterson, my life changed the moment you decided to give me a chance instead of firing me for speaking Chinese. You still call me Mr. Peterson. After everything we've been through, don't you think it's time to just call me Michael? Sophia smiled, realizing there was indeed a fundamental difference between hierarchical respect and genuine respect. Michael, I'll never forget that you risked everything to defend my family. That goes beyond any professional relationship. And I'll never forget that you taught me the best business is built on solid principles and true relationships. 6 months later, during a visit to the United States, Sophia found her mother waiting at the airport with a special expression on her face. Sweetheart, a letter arrived from China. It's official, with important seals. The letter was from the old company where Sophia's grandfather had worked. Along with a new formal declaration of his innocence, it included an invitation for Sophia to visit the company and receive a posthumous tribute in his name. Mom, they want to give Grandpa an honorary medal for significant contributions to Sino-American industrial development. Mrs. Zhang held the letter with trembling hands, rereading it several times as if she couldn't believe it. 15 years of suffering and now this. Your grandfather would be so proud. The tribute ceremony took place 3 months later at the company's headquarters in Shenzhen. Michael insisted on accompanying Sophia, understanding the symbolic importance of the moment. During the ceremony, the company's current president gave a speech acknowledging that past mistakes had harmed an innocent family and that the company was committed to ensuring similar situations would never happen again. Mr. David Chen represents values our company has always sought to promote: technical excellence, personal integrity, and dedication to work, he said. We deeply regret that misunderstandings prevented the proper recognition of his contributions for so long. Sophia received the medal on her grandfather's behalf, feeling that a circle had finally closed. It wasn't just about official recognition, it was about restoring her family's dignity. After the ceremony, the company president made an unexpected proposal. Ms. Sophia, we'd like to invite you to become our lead consultant for relations with American businesses. We believe your experience and integrity can help build stronger bridges between our countries. The offer was tempting, but Sophia didn't hesitate in her response. I'm deeply honored by the invitation, but my loyalty lies with the company that gave me a chance when no one else believed in me. Michael felt immense pride hearing Sophia's answer, not just for her loyalty, but because he saw how she had grown even stronger and more principled through all the hardships she'd faced. On the flight back to the United States, Michael and Sophia talked about future plans for the company and how their lives had changed so dramatically in just a few years. Michael, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never answered that phone in Chinese in front of you. Probably I'd still be struggling to do business in China, losing money and opportunities, and you'd still be hiding your skills and carrying guilt that wasn't yours. Do you think everything happens for a reason? Michael thought for a few minutes before answering. I think good things happen when courageous people make the right choices, even when those choices seem risky at the time. 2 years later, the company had become a leader in US-China trade, with offices in 3 American cities and 2 in China. Sophia had been named executive vice president, and her story had inspired several business school case studies. During an interview for a business magazine, Michael was asked what the most important decision of his entrepreneurial career had been. Without a doubt, it was choosing to invest in a person rather than judging by appearance or social status, he replied. Sophia didn't just transform our company. She transformed my perspective on leadership and what truly matters in business. In the same interview, Sophia was asked about her biggest lesson throughout this journey. I learned that we shouldn't be afraid to show who we really are, For years, I hid my story because I thought it was a weakness. I discovered it was my greatest strength. The magazine published the article under the headline, "From Housekeeper to Executive, a story of courage and principles," and the piece went viral on social media, inspiring hundreds of comments from people who connected with the message. One of the most touching letters came from a young Chinese-American student working as a nanny in Chicago. "Dear Mrs. Chen, your story gave me the courage to apply to business school. I always thought my humble background and Chinese accent would be obstacles. Now I realize they could be my strengths. Thank you for showing me it's possible to dream big." Sophia personally responded to the letter, offering to mentor the young woman. "Michael, I think we should formalize this," she said during a meeting. "Create a program to help young immigrants develop their careers." "That's an excellent idea. How about we start with an annual scholarship?" The Bridges to the Future program launched 6 months later, offering scholarships, mentorship, and internship opportunities for Chinese-American youth in the United States and American students interested in studying in China. During the program's launch ceremony, Michael gave a speech that summarized the philosophy he had learned throughout this journey. "5 years ago, I thought business success was only about profit and growth. Today, I know true success is about creating opportunities for others, building bridges between cultures, and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Sophia, now recognized as one of the most influential executives in the international trade sector, added her own reflections. "This program exists because someone believed in me when I was just a housekeeper with a complicated past. We hope other young people find here the same opportunities I did." The program's first beneficiary was a young man named Kevin Zhang, the son of Chinese immigrants who worked as a food delivery driver while studying economics. His dedication and intelligence impressed both Michael and Sophia. "Kevin, you remind me so much of Sophia when I first met her," Michael said during their first mentoring session. "Talented, hard-working, but hiding your potential. Mr. Peterson, my parents always told me to work hard and not bother anyone. I never thought anyone would see value in what I know about Chinese culture. Kevin, culture is one of the most valuable assets in international business. You just need to learn how to use it to your advantage." Watching Kevin's progress brought nostalgic memories to Sophia of her own journey. She saw in him the same mix of insecurity and determination she had felt years ago. "Kevin, can I give you advice I wish I'd received when I was younger?" "Of course, Mrs. Chen." "Never hide who you are. Your roots, your culture, your story, they're all powerful tools if you know how to use them. The business world doesn't need more of the same. It needs unique people." 6 months later, Kevin had become an exceptional intern, helping the company identify new opportunities in the Chinese food market. His understanding of both American and Chinese culture made him a valuable cultural interpreter. During a presentation to investors, Wei surprised everyone with a detailed analysis of how cultural differences in quality perception affected marketing strategies for imported products. "This young man has the potential to become one of the country's top experts in bilateral trade," commented one investor after the presentation. Michael and Sophia exchanged proud glances, seeing how the cycle of opportunities was renewing itself. 3 years after launching the Bridges to the Future program, the company had helped over 50 young people develop careers in international trade. Some had started their own businesses, others had secured important positions in multinational corporations, and several had returned to China as representatives of US companies. During a program evaluation meeting, Sophia presented numbers that even surprised Michael. In 3 years, the young people who went through our program generated over $5 million in new business for US companies in China. "That's incredible," Michael replied. "But do you know which number makes me proudest?" "Which one?" "Zero. 0 cases of discrimination or prejudice reported by the young people after they secured prominent positions. That means we're truly changing mindsets." That evening, Sophia called her mother to share the program's results. "Mom, can you believe 50 families have had their lives transformed because Michael decided to give me a chance?" "Sweetheart, your grandfather always said kindness begets kindness. When you plant good seeds, they grow and bear fruit that feeds many people. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think of all this. He'd think the Chen family is finally making the difference we always wanted to make. 5 years after that fateful call in Chinese that changed everything, Michael was invited to give a lecture at the country's top business school on transformational leadership. The audience included students, professors, and executives from several major companies. "When I started my career," Michael said during the presentation, "I thought leadership was about giving orders and making decisions. Now I know true leadership is about recognizing potential where others see limitations and having the courage to do what's right, even when it's not easy." A student raised their hand during the Q&A. "Mr. Peterson, when did you realize your leadership approach was working?" Michael smiled, recalling a specific moment. "It was when I noticed Sophia had stopped seeing me as a boss and started seeing me as a partner. When that happens, you know you've created not just a loyal employee, but a leader who will inspire others." After the lecture, several people approached Michael, eager to learn more about the methodology he and Sophia had developed for cultural integration in international business. "Have you ever considered writing a manual on these techniques?" asked a professor of global trade. "Actually, yes," Michael replied. "Sophia and I are working on a book set to be released next year." The book, Invisible Bridges: How Culture and Courage Transform Business, was written over weekends throughout a year. Michael contributed insights on leadership and business strategy, while Sophia added perspectives on cultural navigation and overcoming biases. "Michael, which part was hardest for you to write?" Sophia asked during one of their final editing sessions. "The part about my own initial biases. It was hard to admit that no matter how fair I think I am, I also had limitations in how I saw potential in others. For me, it was writing about the fear I felt, about how years of hiding who I was almost kept me from seizing the opportunity you gave me." The book was launched on a rainy Thursday evening at a bookstore in downtown New York City. To both of their surprise, over 200 people showed up for the event, including business people, students, and many who had benefited from the Bridges to the Future program. Kevin Zhang, now the market development manager at the company, introduced Michael and Sophia to the audience. "These two people didn't just change my life," he said. "They proved that when true leadership meets dedicated talent, it's possible to transform not just companies, but entire communities." During the book signing, an elderly woman approached Sophia with tears in her eyes. "My granddaughter works as a nanny for a wealthy family. She's ashamed to speak Chinese in front of them. I bought this book for her, to show her she doesn't have to hide who she is." Sophia held the woman's hands, feeling the weight of public visibility. "Tell your granddaughter that being Chinese in the United States isn't a limitation. It's a superpower. She just needs to find people who recognize that." 6 months after the book launch, Michael received a call neither of them expected. It was from a documentary producer interested in telling their story to an even wider audience. "Mr. Peterson, your story has all the elements of an inspiring narrative: perseverance, justice, personal transformation, and social impact. We believe it could inspire many people." Sophia hesitated at first about the additional exposure. "Michael, our lives have already changed so much. Do we really need more public attention?" "Sophia, if our story can inspire even one person to find the courage to reveal their potential, or convince a business owner to give someone who seems different a chance, then it's worth it." The documentary, The Call That Changed Everything, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival a year later and was subsequently screened at universities and business events across the country. The response went beyond anything they had imagined. Michael and Sophia began receiving invitations to speak in other cities, consult for companies looking to improve diversity and inclusion, and even proposals to franchise the Bridges to the Future program. "Michael, do you think we're losing focus? Our original business was about importation, not social consulting." "Sophia, our company was always about human connections. Importation was just the means we used to discover that. Indeed, the company had naturally evolved into a more complex and diversified operation. Beyond traditional importation, they now offered cultural consulting, cross-cultural communication training, and leadership development programs. 10 years after that first call in Chinese, Michael and Sophia were invited to an international trade conference in Chicago, where they would share their story with representatives from companies in 15 countries. 10 years ago, Michael said during his presentation, "I thought I knew everything about international business. Today I know the most important aspect of global business isn't logistics or currency exchange. It's the ability to see human potential beyond appearances." Sophia added her own perspective. "For years I carried shame over a past that wasn't my fault. I've learned that our history, even the difficult parts, can become our greatest strength when we find people willing to see us for who we truly are." In the audience were business leaders from various countries, many of whom faced their own challenges related to cultural diversity and integrating immigrants into their organizations. After the presentation, a German businesswoman approached with a specific question. "How do you distinguish between real discrimination and simple cultural misunderstandings?" Sophia answered with the wisdom gained through years of experience. "Discrimination is when someone refuses to see your potential because of who you are. Cultural misunderstandings happen when someone wants to see your potential but doesn't know how. The difference lies in intention and willingness to learn." A Japanese businessman made an observation that led to a deeper discussion. "In many Asian cultures, we value humility and avoid self-promotion. How do we balance that with the need to showcase our worth in Western business environments?" "That's an excellent question," replied Michael. Sophia faced this exact dilemma. The solution wasn't to abandon cultural values, but to find respectful ways to communicate competence without seeming arrogant. "Exactly," Sophia agreed. "I learned I can keep my humility while still advocating for myself. It's not about changing who you are. It's about finding your authentic voice." The conference generated so many connections and opportunities that Michael and Sophia decided to create an international division of the company, specifically focused on cross-cultural consulting for multinational corporations. "Sophia, do you realize we're building something far beyond what we imagined when we started?" "Michael, my grandfather always said that when you do the right work for the right reasons, the universe conspires to expand your impact." 2 years later, the international division had worked with companies in 12 countries, helping integrate diverse talent and improve cross-cultural communication. The Bridges to the Future program had been adapted for other cultural contexts, assisting young immigrants from various nationalities in developing careers in their adopted countries. During an annual review meeting, Sophia presented numbers that even impressed Michael. "In 12 years, our company has directly or indirectly influenced the careers of over 500 people, and those people in turn are influencing others in their own organizations." "What's the economic impact of that?" Michael asked. "Hard to calculate exactly, but we estimate generating over $50 million in new business and job opportunities." "And the social impact?" Sophia smiled, knowing this was the most important question. "Impossible to quantify, but we've received letters from young people who would never have had the courage to pursue certain opportunities without our example, and from business leaders who changed their hiring practices after learning about the benefits of cultural diversity." That evening, Michael and Sophia dined at the same restaurant where they had celebrated their first Chinese contract so many years ago. "Sophia, if you could go back in time and talk to the person you were 12 years ago, what would you say?" "I'd tell her not to be afraid to reveal who she truly is, that the things she sees as weaknesses could become her greatest strengths, and that there are people in the world willing to see potential where others see only limitations." "And you, Michael, what would you say to your past self?" Michael thought for a few moments before answering. "I'd tell myself to pay more attention to the people around me, to question my biases before they keep me from recognizing obvious talent, and to remember that the best business always starts with genuine human connections." "Do you think anything would change if you could?" "No. Every mistake, every challenge, every moment of doubt was necessary to bring us here. If I discovered your abilities the easy way, maybe we'd never have learned the most important lessons about courage and perseverance. 15 years after that first call in Chinese, Michael decided to apply for a regional business award for contributions to economic and social development, not for personal glory, but because the recognition could further amplify the impact of his work. During the award ceremony, Michael was called to the stage to receive the Entrepreneur of the Year trophy from the New York Chamber of Commerce. But instead of going alone, he asked Sophia to join him. "This award isn't mine," and he said before an audience of over 1,000 people. "It's ours. And it belongs to all the people who had the courage to bet on human potential even when it wasn't obvious or convenient." Sophia, now completely comfortable in public settings, added to Michael's speech. 15 years ago, I was a housekeeper afraid to reveal who I really was. Today, I'm here because someone decided principles matter more than appearances. This award is proof that doing the right thing isn't just possible, it's profitable. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes, not just for the business success, but for the inspiring message they both represented. After the ceremony, a young journalist approached for an interview. "Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Chen, what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who want to make a difference but are afraid of the risks?" Michael and Sophia exchanged glances before answering. "Start small," said Michael. "You don't have to change the world all at once. Begin by giving one person a chance when others would overlook them." "And remember," Sophia added, "the biggest risks often come from doing nothing." "If I'd never had the courage to reveal who I was, I would have missed all the incredible opportunities that followed." "One last question," the journalist said. "After all this success, what's your next dream?" Michael and Sophia smiled, knowing they'd discussed this recently. "We want to create a corporate university," Sophia said, "a place where young people from diverse backgrounds can learn not just technical skills, but also how to navigate cultural differences in the business world. And where entrepreneurs can learn that diversity isn't just politically correct," Michael added. "It's economically smart." The corporate university project took shape over the next 2 years. Located in a renovated old warehouse, in downtown New York City, Bridges to the Future Academy offered short courses in international trade, cross-cultural communication, inclusive leadership, and entrepreneurship for immigrants. On Inauguration Day, Michael and Sophia met in the morning for a final review before the official ceremony. "Michael, do you have any idea how many lives could be transformed here?" "Sophia, do you have any idea how far we've come since that first call in Chinese?" They both laughed, remembering how it had all started so simply and grown into something so complex and impactful. The inauguration ceremony drew over 500 people, including business leaders, educators, government, representatives, and dozens of young people interested in the courses offered. During his speech, Michael reflected on the journey that had brought them there. 15 years ago, an employee answered a phone in Chinese in front of me. That simple action set off a chain of events that transformed not just our lives, but the lives of hundreds of others. Today, we open this space as proof that opportunities can arise from the most unexpected moments. Sophia, now recognized as one of the country's leading experts in cross-cultural communication, spoke about the importance of creating spaces where differences are celebrated, not just tolerated. This academy exists for young people who, like I was 15 years ago, have unique talents but don't know how to use them. And for business leaders who, like Michael was, have good intentions but need to learn to see potential beyond appearances. The first group of students at the academy included young people from 15 different nationalities, all with stories of resilience and aspirations to contribute to the development of their adopted countries. One of the students, Emma Wong, the daughter of Chinese immigrants who worked as a waitress, summed up the general feeling during the first class. "For years, I thought my Chinese heritage was something I needed to hide to be accepted in the United States. Now I'm learning it could be my greatest competitive advantage." Kevin Zhang, now the Academy's talent development director, used his own experience to inspire the new students. 8 years ago, I was a food delivery worker who hid my language skills. Today, I oversee programs that help young people like you discover and develop your unique talents. Transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it happens when you have courage and find the right people. 2 years after the academy opened, Michael and Sophia decided it was time to take the next step in their work's evolution. They wanted to create a documentary about the academy's first graduates, showing how different cultural backgrounds could become competitive advantages in the job market. The documentary Invisible Talents followed 12 young people over 6 months from their first classes at the academy to their first professional opportunities. The individual stories were diverse, but the common theme was the transformation that happened when potential met opportunity. One of the most impactful stories was that of Rayed al-Karim, a Syrian refugee who spoke 5 languages but worked as a janitor because he couldn't validate his academic credentials in the United States. When I arrived in the US, Rayed said during one interview, "I thought I'd only ever be a janitor. At the academy, I learned that being multilingual and having international experience are valuable skills, not just personal quirks." 6 months after completing the course, Rayed secured a position as an international communications coordinator at an export company, using his language skills and cultural knowledge to facilitate business with the Middle East. The documentary premiered at the Park City Film Festival and was later screened at universities and companies across the country, sparking discussions about how to identify and develop diverse talent. During one screening, a textile industry executive approached Michael with an interesting proposal. "Mr. Peterson, after watching the documentary, I realized my company is missing opportunities because we don't know how to identify diverse talent in our hiring process. Could you help us?" This conversation led to the creation of another division of their company, an HR consultancy focused on recruiting and developing diverse talent. Within 2 years, they were working with over 30 companies, helping redesign hiring processes and create more inclusive workplaces. 20 years after that first call in Chinese, Michael and Sophia met to reflect on everything they had built. "Sophia, can you believe we started with you cleaning my house and being afraid to reveal you spoke Chinese?" "Michael, can you believe we now have a company with 150 employees, an academy that has graduated over 1,000 young people, and consulting work in 5 countries?" Both fell silent for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of the transformation they had experienced and made possible for others. "What do you think was the decisive moment?" Michael asked. "When you decided to bet on me instead of letting me go?" "Everything that came after was a result of that first courageous decision. For me, it was when you had the courage to reveal the truth about your past. That showed me transparency and vulnerability can be strengths, not weaknesses." That night, they organized a celebration party for all employees, alumni of the academy, and business partners. It was a celebration not just of business success, but of the human impact they had managed to create. During the party, Mrs. Zhang, now 80 years old, gave a brief speech that moved everyone present. "My husband always said kindness planted in fertile soil bears fruit that feeds generations. Seeing everything my daughter and Michael have built, and all the lives that were transformed, I know he would be proud to see how his seeds have blossomed." Kevin Zhang, now married and a father of 2, represented all the academy alumni in a speech of gratitude. 10 years ago, I was a lost young man hiding my abilities out of fear of discrimination. Today, my children grow up knowing that being different is being special, and that there are people in the world willing to bet on human potential. That is the most valuable gift you've given us. At the end of the party, Michael and Sophia found themselves alone on the office balcony, watching the city lights and reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had shared. "Michael, if someone had told me 20 years ago that I'd be co-owner of an international company, founder of an academy and a recognized consultant, I would have laughed. If someone had told me 20 years ago that my greatest professional achievement would be giving opportunities to others, I would have laughed too. I thought success was about accumulating wealth for myself. What do you think comes next?" Michael smiled, knowing they had already discussed this. "I think it's time to write the second book and to create a mentorship program for other entrepreneurs who want to make a difference but don't know where to start, and open academy branches in other cities and develop partnerships with universities to integrate intercultural education into traditional business curricula. Both knew that even after 2 decades of success, their journey was far from over. They had discovered that making a difference in people's lives was work that never truly ended. It only evolved and expanded. 3 years later, Michael and Sophia launched their second book, Leadership Without Borders: How to Build Diverse Teams That Generate Extraordinary Results. The book became required reading in several business schools and was translated into 6 languages. During the international book launch in New York, Michael was asked what advice he would give his younger self. "I'd say to pay attention to the people around you. That talent comes in all shapes, colors, and accents, and that the best leaders are those who recognize potential where others see only differences." Sophia, now fluent in 4 languages and internationally recognized as an expert in intercultural communication, added to his answer, "I'd say never be ashamed of who you are. Your roots, your culture, your history, all of these are valuable assets in today's globalized world. You just need to find the right people who know how to appreciate them." The book led to speaking invitations in 15 countries, and Michael and Sophia found themselves traveling the world, sharing their methodology with entrepreneurs, educators, and government leaders interested in promoting inclusion and diversity. In Singapore, a local businesswoman asked a question that made them reflect deeply. "How do you maintain the authenticity of your approach when working in such different cultures?" "Fundamental principles are universal," Michael replied. "Respect, courage, fairness, and opportunity are values that transcend cultural boundaries. And we adapt the methodology without compromising core values," Sophia added. "Every culture has its own ways of expressing these principles, but the essence remains the same." 5 years after the release of their second book, Michael and Sophia decided to create their most ambitious project yet, a global online platform connecting diverse young talent with entrepreneurs willing to bet on untapped potential. "Michael, do you realize we're trying to democratize opportunity on a global scale?" "Sophia, do you realize we're finally creating the world we wish we'd found when we were younger?" The Global Talent Bridges platform launched at a virtual conference that drew participants from 40 countries. Within 6 months, over 10,000 young people had registered, and 500 companies were offering mentorship, internships, and job opportunities. One of the platform's first success stories was Imani Johnson, a young Nigerian woman with an engineering background who had been working as a sales clerk at an electronics store in Chicago. Through the platform, she connected with a US startup needing someone with tech expertise and English fluency to expand into African markets. "I was wasting my education because I didn't know how to prove my worth," Imani said in an interview for the platform's blog. Global Talent Bridges connected me with business owners who saw my Nigerian background as an asset, not a barrier. 6 months later, Imani had been promoted to the startup's international expansion manager, leading the company's entry into 3 African markets. Stories like hers multiplied worldwide, validating Michael and Sophia's belief that talent exists everywhere, but opportunities remain unevenly distributed. During the platform's annual review meeting, Sophia shared impressive numbers with the team. "In 2 years, we've facilitated over 5,000 connections between diverse talent and businesses. Of those, 60% resulted in concrete job or partnership opportunities." "And the economic impact?" Michael asked. "We estimate these connections have generated over $200 million in new economic value, but the social impact is even greater." Michael nodded, knowing the platform's true success couldn't be measured in numbers alone. "Sophia, sometimes I think that call in Chinese was the most important moment of my business career." "Why?" "Because it taught me that the best investments are always in people. Everything we've built since then has been based on that fundamental lesson." 25 years after that first call in Chinese, Michael and Sophia were invited to receive a special honor at New York City's Municipal Chamber for their contributions to the city's economic and social development. During the ceremony, the mayor highlighted how their work had influenced public policies on immigrant integration and diverse talent development. Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen proved that doing good isn't just possible, it's profitable. Their approach inspired our city to create similar programs for integrating immigrants into our local economy. Michael, now gray-haired but still as enthusiastic as ever, spoke about how his perspective on success had evolved over the years. 25 years ago, I measured success by how much money I made. Today, I measure it by how many lives we've positively transformed. And I discovered that when you focus on the second, the first happens naturally. Sophia, now recognized as one of the country's most influential business leaders, reflected on the importance of individual courage to create systemic change. One person with courage can change their own life. Two people with courage can change the lives of many others. Our story proves that small acts of courage can have extraordinary impacts when we persist and find partners who share our values. In the audience were dozens of young people who had benefited from their programs over the years, many now in leadership positions in their own companies and communities. Kevin Zhang, now director of his own consulting firm specializing in Asian markets, represented all the former program participants. Michael and Sophia didn't just give us opportunities, he said. They taught us that we have a responsibility to create opportunities for others. Today, each of us is replicating the principles we learned from them in our own organizations. After the ceremony, Michael and Sophia walked through the streets of downtown New York City, passing the building where it had all begun 25 years earlier. Michael, do you ever feel nostalgic for those early days, when everything was simpler? Sometimes. But then I remember all the lives we've been able to touch since then, and I realize the complexity is worth it. Do you think we've really managed to change anything in the world? Michael stopped and pointed to a young man walking by, speaking Arabic on the phone, clearly comfortable with his multicultural identity. Sophia, 25 years ago, that young man would probably have been hiding who he is. Today, he speaks his native language without fear. That's real change. And do you think our story will inspire others to make similar choices? I'm sure it will. Because we've proven that doing the right thing isn't just a moral issue, it's a smart business strategy. That evening, Michael and Sophia gathered at home for dinner with Mrs. Zhang, now a great-grandmother and still the wise matriarch of the family. Grandma Zhang, said Michael, using the affectionate term he'd adopted over the years. What would Mr. Zhao think of everything that's happened? Mrs. Zhang smiled, her eyes shining with pride. He'd say that justice has finally found our family. Not just legal justice, but the justice of recognition, opportunity, and respect. And what do you think comes next for us? You're still young. You still have so much work to do, so many lives to touch, so many minds to open. Michael and Sophia exchanged glances, knowing she was right. Even after decades of success, they still felt they were just beginning. Sophia, what's your next dream? I want the day to come when stories like ours aren't extraordinary but common, when giving opportunities to diverse talents is the norm, not the exception. And you, Michael? I want to create a legacy that keeps generating opportunities long after we're gone, something that sustains and grows on its own. Both knew they still had decades of work ahead, but they also knew they had created something that had already taken on a life of its own. The principles they had developed were being applied by hundreds of people around the world, creating a ripple effect that went far beyond their individual capacities. 10 years later, Michael and Sophia published their third and final book, The Legacy of Courage: How Small Acts Transform Generations. It was a reflection on how individual decisions can create waves of change that spread for decades. During the book launch, a journalist asked the question they both knew would eventually come. After more than 3 decades of transforming lives, do you have any regrets? Michael and Sophia exchanged glances before answering. My only regret, said Michael, is not learning these lessons sooner. Imagine how many other opportunities we missed because of biases we didn't even know we had. And my regret, added Sophia, is spending so many years hiding who I was, out of fear. How much time I wasted being less than I could have been. But you've made up for it by helping thousands of others avoid the same mistakes, commented the journalist. That's true, agreed Michael. And perhaps that's the beauty of human life. Our mistakes become lessons we can teach others. The final chapter of the book contained a reflection that summed up everything they had learned over more than 3 decades. Every person we meet carries untapped potential. Our responsibility as leaders, entrepreneurs, and human beings is to create environments where that potential can flourish. Not because it's politically correct, but because it's economically smart and morally imperative. The world doesn't need more of the same. It needs authentic people with the courage to be who they truly are. The book became an international bestseller and was used as the foundation for diversity and inclusion policies in companies and government organizations around the world. 5 years after the release of the last book, Michael decided it was time to retire from the day-to-day management of the businesses, handing over control to Sophia and other leaders they had developed over the years. Sophia, are you ready to lead all this on your own? Michael, I'll never be leading alone. You taught me that leadership is about building teams where every person can shine. We have an incredible team that will keep expanding this work. During the transition ceremony, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey they had shared. 40 years ago, I was a businessman focused only on profits. Today, I leave you an organization that proves it's possible to do well by doing good. My greatest achievement isn't the financial numbers, but the lives transformed. Sophia, now CEO of a conglomerate that included import, consulting, education, and technology companies, spoke about their plans for the future. Michael planted seeds that will keep bearing fruit for generations. Our responsibility now is to ensure these principles spread even further, reaching communities and countries we haven't yet touched. 2 years after Michael's retirement, Sophia received a call that brought her back to the origins of their entire story. It was from a young housekeeper in Washington, D.C., who had watched the documentary about their lives. Miss Sophia, my name is Lucy Wu. I'm the daughter of Chinese immigrants and work as a housekeeper. Yesterday, my employer heard me speaking Mandarin on the phone, and instead of scolding me, asked if I could help her with some emails from Chinese suppliers. Sophia felt a wave of déjà vu and emotion. Lucy, tell me more about your situation. I have a degree in business from China, but when I arrived in the United States, I couldn't validate my diploma. I've been working as a housekeeper to survive, but I always hid that I speak Chinese because I thought employers might distrust me. And what happened after your employer found out? She offered me part-time work helping with international correspondence in addition to housekeeping. It's not much, but it's a start. Sophia immediately offered Lucy a full scholarship to the Bridges to the Future Academy and connected her with partner companies that needed professionals with knowledge of the Chinese market. Lucy, your story reminds me so much of my own journey. The difference is that today we have a support network that didn't exist when I started. 6 months later, Lucy had completed the academy program and secured a position as an international market analyst at an agribusiness company, helping expand exports from the United States to China. During a follow-up conversation, Lucy made an observation that deeply moved Sophia. Mrs. Sophia, you saved my life without even knowing me. Just knowing your story was possible gave me the courage to reveal who I truly am. Lucy, you saved yourself. I just helped connect you with the right opportunities. But without your example, I would never have had the courage to try. This conversation made Sophia realize that the impact of her work went far beyond the people she had directly touched. Simply existing as proof that transformation was possible was inspiring people she didn't even know. That evening, Sophia called Michael to share Lucy's story. Michael, do you realize our story is still inspiring people we've never even met? Sophia, that's what it means to create a true legacy. When your actions continue to generate positive results long after you've taken them. Sometimes I'm amazed at how one simple call in Chinese changed so many lives. It wasn't the call, Sophia. It was your courage to be authentic and my courage to bet on potential even when it wasn't obvious. The call was just the catalyst. 45 years after that first call in Chinese, Michael and Sophia reunited to celebrate the company's anniversary at a ceremony attended by over 1,000 people, including former employees, academy alumni, business partners and corporate leaders from various countries. Michael, now 80 but still with the same infectious enthusiasm, gave a speech that summarized the philosophy they had developed over the decades. When I started my career, I thought success was about beating the competition. Today, I know true success is about creating more opportunities than you consume. It's about leaving the world a little better than you found it. Sophia, now 60 and recognized as one of the most influential business leaders in the Southern Hemisphere, reflected on the transformative power of authenticity. I spent the first years of my adulthood trying to be less Chinese, less different, less visible. Today, I know our authenticity is our greatest asset. We shouldn't hide from the world. We should show the world who we truly are. During the IB celebration, hundreds of people approached them to share how Michael and Sophia's work had influenced their own lives and careers. Kevin Zhang, now a grandfather and advisor to several diversity and inclusion-focused startups, summed up the general sentiment. Michael and Sophia didn't just change our individual lives, they changed how an entire generation thinks about talent, opportunity, and human potential. A young Nigerian entrepreneur who had participated in their online mentorship program 5 years earlier traveled all the way from the United States to thank them in person. Thanks to the principles I learned from you, my company became the bridge between the United States and several African countries. We didn't just generate profit, we created opportunities for hundreds of young Africans to work with American companies. The stories multiplied throughout the night, each demonstrating how the principles developed by Michael and Sophia had spread across the world, creating waves of positive change far beyond their individual capacities. At the end of the celebration, Michael and Sophia stood alone on the balcony, watching the city lights and reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had shared. Sophia, if you could speak to that young employee from 45 years ago, what would you say? I'd tell her that call in Chinese wasn't a mistake that almost cost her job. It was the moment that changed not only her life, but the lives of thousands of others. And what about you, Michael? What would you say to your younger self? I'd say the smartest decision he'd ever make in life would be to bet on someone others considered unlikely. And that bet would become the foundation of a legacy lasting generations. Both fell silent for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what they'd built together. Michael, do you think we've truly changed the world? Sophia, we've changed the world one person at a time. And those people are changing others. That's how real change happens. And do you think our legacy will continue after we're gone? Michael smiled, gesturing to the buildings around them where they knew hundreds of companies now applied principles similar to those they'd developed. Our legacy has already taken on a life of its own. It's embedded in the culture of dozens of companies, in the curricula of universities, and in the mindset of thousands of leaders worldwide. It'll keep growing even when we're not here to see it. 5 years later, Sophia received a call that made her realize just how far their impact had reached. It was from a young executive in Singapore implementing diversity and inclusion programs, based on the methodology Michael and Sophia had developed. Mrs. Chen, my name is Amy Wong. We've never met, but your story changed the course of my career and my company. How so, Amy? 3 years ago, I attended a talk where you spoke about turning differences into competitive advantages. It inspired me to create a similar program at my company here in Singapore. Now, we have talent from 20 different countries contributing to our success. And how has that affected the company's results? In the last 2 years, our revenue grew by 40%, but more importantly, we've built a culture where everyone feels valued for what they uniquely bring. And now other companies in Singapore are asking for consulting to implement similar methodologies. Sophia was moved to see that the principles she and Michael had developed were spreading organically worldwide, adapting to different cultures while keeping their core essence. Amy, this is exactly what we hoped for when we started this work, that others would take the principles and adapt them to their own realities. Mrs. Chen, may I ask a personal question? Of course. How did you keep hope during the tough times, when it seemed like nothing was working? Sophia considered the question, remembering the moments of doubt and uncertainty they'd faced over the years. Amy, we learned that, When you're doing something that truly matters, the universe conspires to help. It might take time, it might be hard, but if you persist with the right principles, you'll eventually find the right people and opportunities. And what advice would you give young leaders who want to make a difference, but feel overwhelmed by the world's problems? Start small, but start. One person, one opportunity, one courageous decision at a time. Don't try to change the whole world at once. Just change the small part within your reach. After the call, Sophia reflected on how fulfilling it was to know the work she and Michael had built continued to grow and evolve, even without their direct involvement. That evening, she called Michael to share her conversation with Amy. Michael, our methodology is being applied in Singapore by someone we've never even met. Sophia, that's the definition of true success, when your ideas take on a life of their own and keep spreading without you needing to be there. Sometimes I still have trouble believing everything we've achieved. Sophia, you didn't achieve anything alone. We achieved it together, and more importantly, we created a network of people who are achieving even greater things. 50 years after that first call in Chinese, the story of Michael and Sophia had become a classic case study in business schools around the world, used to teach about transformational leadership, diversity and inclusion, and how small decisions can have extraordinary impacts. During an academic conference on ethical leadership, a professor from Wharton gave a presentation titled "The Chen Peterson Case: How a Phone Call Changed Business Paradigms." What makes this story so powerful, said the professor, isn't just the impressive financial results, but the proof that doing the right thing is also doing the smart thing. Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen demonstrated that investing in diverse human potential isn't just a matter of social responsibility, but of competitive advantage. In the audience were students from 20 different countries, many of whom identified with Sophia's journey of overcoming prejudice and turning differences into strengths. A Chinese student raised her hand during the Q&A session. Professor, what does the Chen Peterson case teach us about identifying untapped potential in our own organizations? Excellent question. The case teaches us that potential often hides behind superficial appearances. Michael Peterson almost missed an extraordinary opportunity because he initially saw Sophia only as a housekeeper. The lesson is that we must constantly question our first impressions and create environments where people feel safe to reveal their true talents. Another student from the United States made an observation that led to a deeper discussion. Professor, it seems the key to their success was mutual courage. Michael had the courage to bet on untapped potential, and Sophia had the courage to be authentic. How do we cultivate that kind of courage in business environments? That's one of the most important lessons of the case. Courage is contagious. When a leader shows the courage to do what's right, it inspires others to be equally courageous. Michael and Sophia created a culture where courage and authenticity were valued, and that spread throughout the organization. The academic discussion about the Chen Peterson case had become so robust that a European university decided to create a research center dedicated specifically to studying diversity and inclusion methodologies based on their principles. Sophia was invited to the inauguration of the center, which was named the Chen Peterson Institute for Inclusive Leadership. During the opening ceremony, Sophia reflected on how surreal it was to have her name associated with an academic institution. 50 years ago, I was a housekeeper, afraid to reveal I spoke Chinese. Today, I'm inaugurating a research institute that bears my name. If that isn't proof that transformation is possible, I don't know what is. The university's dean highlighted the global importance of the work Michael and Sophia had developed. The Chen Peterson Institute isn't just about studying diversity and inclusion. It's about researching how individual differences can become collective advantages, how small acts of courage can create waves of change that transform entire societies. In the following years, the Institute produced dozens of studies that scientifically validated many of the principles Michael and Sophia had developed intuitively through their practical experiences. One of the most impactful studies showed that companies applying methodologies similar to those they developed had on average 35% more innovation, 50% better talent retention, and 25% higher profitability compared to similar companies that didn't apply these principles. When Sophia learned about the study results, she immediately called Michael. "Michael, now we have scientific proof that our approach really works." "Sophia, we always knew it worked. We've lived it every day for decades. But it's good to have academic validation to convince the skeptics. What impresses me most is that the researchers discovered principles we applied intuitively. That means we were on the right path from the beginning. Or it means that when you do the right things for the right reasons, science eventually explains why they work." 60 years after that first call in Chinese, Michael, now 90, and Sophia, 75, were invited to receive honorary doctorate degrees from Columbia University in recognition of their contributions to developing new approaches to leadership and business management. During the ceremony, Michael delivered what everyone knew would be his last major public speech. 60 years ago, a young woman answered a phone in Chinese in front of me. At that moment, I had a choice: to see it as a problem or an opportunity. I chose to see it as an opportunity, and that choice changed not only our lives but the lives of thousands of others. Michael paused for a moment, visibly emotional, before continuing. "The most important lesson I've learned is that every person we meet is an opportunity to do something extraordinary. Don't waste those opportunities. They may not come again." Sophia, upon receiving her own degree, reflected on the extraordinary journey they had shared. "When I was young, I believed my humble background and Chinese heritage were obstacles I needed to overcome. Today, I know they were exactly the assets I needed to contribute uniquely to the world. Never hide who you are. The world needs your authenticity." After the ceremony, Michael and Sophia walked through the university gardens, knowing this was likely one of the last public events they would attend together. "Sophia, if you could live it all again, would you change anything? Maybe I'd have been less afraid at the start. But all the fears, all the struggles, all the obstacles were necessary to teach us the lessons we later shared with others." "And you, Michael? Any regrets?" "Just one. I wish I had more time to see how our story continues to inspire future generations." They both fell silent, knowing they had lived extraordinary lives and created a legacy that would endure far beyond their physical presence. 2 years later, Michael passed away peacefully in his sleep at 92. Sophia, devastated by the loss of the partner who had transformed her life, found comfort in the certainty that their work would continue. During Michael's funeral, over 1,000 people attended, including former employees, alumni, business partners, and corporate leaders from various countries. Each person had a story about how Michael had positively influenced their life or career. Kevin Zhang, now in his 60s, represented all the alumni from their programs during the eulogy. Michael Peterson didn't just give us opportunities. He taught us that we have a responsibility to create opportunities for others. His death isn't the end of his story. It's the moment his story multiplies through all of us who were privileged to learn from him. Sophia, though deeply saddened, found the strength to speak about the legacy Michael had left behind. Michael always said that true success is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you leave behind. He left behind a global network of people who know that doing the right thing is also doing the smart thing. He left behind proof that one courageous person can transform thousands of lives. After the funeral, Sophia decided to dedicate her remaining years to ensuring Michael's legacy would continue to grow. She established a foundation in his name and created a scholarship program for young leaders interested in applying principles of diversity and inclusion in their own organizations. 3 years after Michael's passing, Sophia received a letter that made her realize just how far the impact of their work had reached. It was from a young executive in Japan who had implemented similar programs in her company. "Dear Mrs. Chen, my name is Akiko Tanaka. We've never met, but your and Mr. Peterson's story inspired a complete transformation in how my company approaches diversity. As a result, not only have we improved our financial performance, but we've created an environment where employees from 15 different nationalities feel valued and respected." The letter went on to describe how the principles developed by Michael and Sophia had been adapted to Japanese culture, preserving the essence while respecting local nuances. Most importantly, our experience has inspired other Japanese companies to rethink their approaches. We estimate that, indirectly, your principles have already influenced over 50 companies in Tokyo alone. Sophia responded to the letter, offering support and mentorship to Akiko, knowing that each new person who applied their principles created ripples of change that spread far beyond her individual ability to influence. At 80 years old, Sophia decided to write her memoirs, not as a traditional autobiography, but as a practical guide for future generations of leaders interested in creating positive change. The book, Transformative Calls, Memories of a Life Dedicated to Inclusion, was written as a series of letters to young leaders, sharing practical lessons on how to identify and nurture diverse human potential. One of the book's most powerful passages summarized the core philosophy that had guided her entire career. Every person you meet carries untapped potential within them. Your responsibility as leaders is not to judge that potential based on superficial appearances, but to create environments where it can flourish. When you do this consistently, you don't just transform individual lives, you transform organizations, communities, and eventually entire societies. The book became required reading in several business schools and was translated into 12 languages, continuing to spread the principles Michael and Sophia had developed to an even larger global audience. During the book launch, Sophia was asked what her final message to future generations would be. Don't be afraid to bet on people others consider unlikely. Don't be afraid to be authentic even when it feels risky. And always remember, small acts of courage can have extraordinary consequences. 5 years later, at 85, Sophia passed away peacefully, surrounded by family and some of the young leaders she had mentored over the years. Kevin Zhang, now the president of the Chen Peterson Foundation, organized a celebration of life ceremony that drew over 2,000 people from 60 different countries. Sophia Chen started as a domestic worker who feared revealing her true identity, Kevin said during the eulogy. She passed away as one of the most influential business leaders of the century, whose methodology is being applied in hundreds of organizations around the world. Her journey proves that transformation is always possible, no matter where you start. During the ceremony, letters were read from business leaders, academics, and politicians from various countries, all describing how Michael and Sophia's work had influenced their own approaches to leadership and management. One of the most touching letters came from Lucy Wu, the young woman who had called Sophia decades earlier, when she was a domestic worker. Sophia Chen taught me that I shouldn't be ashamed of who I am, but proud of everything I can contribute. Today I'm the CEO of a company that connects Latino talent with opportunities in Asia, applying the same principles I learned from her. Her legacy lives on through every life she touched. 10 years after Sophia's passing, the Chen Peterson Institute had become one of the world's leading centers for research on inclusive leadership and diversity management. Their methodologies were being applied in over 1,000 companies across 50 countries, and conservative estimates suggested they had positively influenced the careers of more than 100,000 people. During a commemorative conference, marking the 70th anniversary of that first call in Chinese, the Institute's current director gave a presentation on the lasting impact of Michael and Sophia's work. The story of Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen proves that transformational leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to ask the right questions and betting on human potential even when it isn't obvious, said the Institute's director. They turned a simple phone call into a global movement that continues to grow decades after their deaths. In the audience were hundreds of young leaders from different countries, many of whom had grown up hearing their story as an example of how small choices can have big consequences. A young Brazilian executive raised her hand during the Q&A session. "Professor, how can we apply the Chen Peterson principles in a world that has changed so much since they began?" Excellent question. The world has changed, but the core principles remain the same. The courage to see potential where others see limitations, the authenticity to show who we truly are, and the persistence to do what's right even when it's hard. Technology evolves, but human nature stays constant. A young entrepreneur from Nigeria made an observation that led to a deeper discussion. Professor, it seems Michael and Sophia managed to create systemic change by starting with individual transformations. How do we scale this kind of approach to global problems? That's the brilliance of the Chen-Peterson methodology. They understood that lasting change happens from the bottom up, not the top down. When you transform individuals, they transform organizations. When organizations change, they influence societies. It's a slower process than decrees or policies, but it's more enduring because it's built on genuine conviction, not forced compliance. After the conference, several attendees approached the director, interested in implementing similar programs in their own countries and organizations. Professor, our company in Mexico is facing challenges similar to what Michael and Sophia faced in the beginning, said a Mexican businesswoman. We have many employees of indigenous backgrounds who hide their cultural skills because they fear discrimination. And what's your strategy for addressing this? We want to create an environment where these skills are seen as assets, not stigmas. We thought about starting exactly as Michael did, giving one person a real opportunity to prove their worth and letting that person's success inspire others. That's precisely the Chen-Peterson approach. Start with one person, prove it works, and let the success spread organically. Similar conversations were happening simultaneously in dozens of countries, with business leaders, educators, and politicians seeking ways to apply the principles developed by Michael and Sophia to their own cultural contexts and specific challenges. In the United States, the story of Michael and Sophia had become almost legendary, told as a classic example of ethical entrepreneurship and transformational leadership. Several streets and squares had been named in their honor, and a federal university had established the Chen-Peterson program to support young entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. During the program's inauguration ceremony at the federal university, the dean gave a speech summarizing the lasting impact of their legacy on the country. Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen proved that the United States has the potential to be a global leader in inclusion and innovation. Not because we have the best resources or technologies, but because we have people willing to see potential where others see only differences. The first group of program beneficiaries included young people from 15 US states, representing the country's ethnic and cultural diversity. Among them was Nijoni Navajo, a 22-year-old indigenous woman who had developed a project using traditional knowledge from her tribe to create sustainable cosmetic products. Sophia's story taught me not to hide my indigenous heritage, Nijoni said during the opening ceremony. She showed me that my culture can be my greatest competitive advantage in the business world. Another beneficiary was Kofi Freeman, a descendant of historic black communities who had founded a startup focused on cultural tourism in traditional territories. Michael Peterson proved that entrepreneurs can succeed by doing good. My project isn't just about profit, it's about showing that traditional communities have much to offer the modern world. The Chen-Peterson program at the Federal University became so successful that other US universities created similar initiatives, forming a national network to support entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. 5 years after the program's launch, the results surpassed all expectations. The young people supported by the program had founded over 200 businesses, created thousands of jobs, and developed innovative products and services that blended traditional knowledge with modern technology. Nijoni Navajo, who had started the program with a simple idea about natural cosmetics, now ran a company exporting products to 10 countries and employing over 50 people, including many youth from her own community. The program gave me more than technical knowledge, Nijoni said in an interview for a business magazine. It gave me the confidence to show the world that indigenous knowledge isn't primitive. It's advanced in ways the modern world is only beginning to understand. Kofi Freeman had expanded his cultural tourism startup into a model that directly benefited historic black communities, ensuring economic development strengthened cultural traditions rather than threatening them. Michael and Sophia taught me through their example that true business success is when you can thrive while helping others thrive too, Kofi said during a conference on sustainable tourism. The success stories from the US program inspired other nations to create similar initiatives. The Canadian government launched a program to support Indigenous entrepreneurs based on the Chen Peterson methodology. South Africa launched an initiative to connect young people from different ethnic groups through collaborative business projects. In China, where it had all begun decades earlier, a university in Beijing established the Chen Peterson International Center for Cultural Harmony in Business, focused on researching how cultural differences could become competitive advantages in multinational corporations. Professor Wang Jian, director of the Chinese Center, was the grandson of Mr. Tang, who had helped Michael and Sophia clear her grandfather's name decades ago. My grandfather always told me the story of how two Americans had the courage to come to China to defend the truth, Professor Wang said during the center's inauguration. That story inspired me to dedicate my academic career to studying how courage and integrity can transform international business relationships. The Chinese Center quickly became a hub for research on intercultural communication and multinational team management, collaborating with similar institutions in other countries to develop increasingly sophisticated methodologies based on Michael and Sophia's original principles. One of the center's most groundbreaking studies showed that companies applying Chen Peterson principles in their international operations had 60% fewer cultural conflicts, 45% better performance in multinational projects, and 30% higher retention of diverse talent compared to companies that did not apply these principles. The numbers confirm what Michael and Sophia intuitively discovered, Professor Wang said during the presentation of the results. Genuinely investing in cultural differences isn't just morally right, it's strategically smart. 80 years. After that first phone call in Chinese, the Chen Peterson methodology had been formally adopted by over 2,000 companies worldwide, taught in more than 100 universities, and applied by governmental and non-governmental organizations in 40 countries. During a global conference on the Chen Peterson legacy, 8 decades of transformation, representatives from every continent gathered to share how the principles developed by Michael and Sophia had been adapted to different cultural and economic contexts. The conference was opened by Nizhoni Navajo, now a successful international entrepreneur and advocate for indigenous rights, who had been chosen to represent the new generation of leaders inspired by the original story. Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen started with a simple question. What if we saw differences as advantages rather than obstacles? Nizhoni said before an audience of over 3,000 people. 80 years later, we have the answer. More profitable businesses, more harmonious societies, and millions of people living with dignity and purpose. A Japanese businessman shared how he had applied Chen Peterson principles to integrate foreign workers into his tech company. At first, we hired foreigners only to fill positions locals didn't want. After studying the Chen Peterson methodology, we began seeing them as bearers of unique perspectives that could help us innovate. Within 5 years, our company became a leader in technological solutions for global markets. A German executive explained how she had used the principles to transform a traditional family business into a truly multicultural organization. Our biggest challenge was convincing third-generation employees that change was necessary. We applied. The Chen Peterson approach started small, proved it worked with one person, and let success inspire others. Today, our company operates in 15 countries, and our cultural diversity is our greatest competitive advantage. The presentations continued for 3 days, each demonstrating how the fundamental principles developed by Michael and Sophia had been adapted and applied in completely different contexts, yet always preserving the core essence: the courage to see potential, the authenticity to be genuine, and the persistence to do what is right. On the final day of the conference, the creation of the Chen Peterson Global Network was announced, an international organization dedicated to connecting businesses, universities, and organizations that applied methodologies based on their principles. The global network isn't about standardizing approaches, explained the founding director. It's about sharing lessons, celebrating diverse applications, and ensuring the Chen-Peterson principles continue evolving to meet new, global challenges. The network quickly grew to include members from 70 countries, creating a global community of leaders committed to inclusion, innovation, and positive transformation. One of its first initiatives was an exchange program for young leaders, allowing students and professionals from different countries to learn from one another by applying Chen-Peterson principles in diverse cultural contexts. Amy Wong, a young Chinese American who participated in the first exchange program, spent 6 months in the United States studying how local businesses applied Chen-Peterson principles to integrate traditional communities into the modern economy. "I grew up hearing Michael and Sophia's story like a fairy tale," Amy said in an interview. "Participating in the exchange program showed me it wasn't a fairy tale. It was a practical methodology anyone with enough courage could apply." After returning to the United States, Amy founded a consulting firm specializing in helping American companies better integrate employees of Asian heritage, applying adaptations of the Chen-Peterson principles she had learned abroad. Michael and Sophia proved that cultural differences can be competitive advantages, Amy said during a talk in Silicon Valley. "My work is helping American companies discover how to apply that lesson in our own context." Similar stories multiplied worldwide, with young leaders from different countries studying applications of Chen-Peterson principles in other cultural settings and returning to implement adapted versions in their own communities. 90 years. After that first call in Chinese, Michael and Sophia's story had transcended its original context to become a global symbol of how courageous individuals can create transformative change. In an elementary school in the Bronx, Nigeria, children from different ethnic groups learned conflict resolution using a simplified version of Chen-Peterson principles. At a university in New York City, business students analyzed case studies based on modern applications of their methodology. In a community center in Detroit, immigrants from various countries received entrepreneurship training using materials developed by the Chen-Peterson Global Network. During a special ceremony marking the 90th anniversary of the original call, the current president of the Chen-Peterson Global Network, great-granddaughter of Kevin Zhang, reflected on the enduring impact of the story. Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen could never have imagined that a simple phone call would become the catalyst for a global movement that changed how we think about leadership, diversity, and human potential, she said, before an online audience of over 100,000 people from every continent. But perhaps that's the true lesson of their story. We never know which of our everyday actions might have extraordinary consequences. Our responsibility is to act with courage and integrity in every moment, trusting that the positive impact will multiply in ways we can't even imagine. The online broadcast of the ceremony included testimonials from business leaders, academics, and politicians from dozens of countries, each describing how the Chen-Peterson principles had influenced their own approaches to leadership and social transformation. One of the most moving testimonials came from a young Syrian refugee who had become a successful entrepreneur in Europe by applying principles she learned through the Chen-Peterson Global Network. "When I arrived in Europe as a refugee, I thought my background would always be a barrier," she said via video conference from Berlin. "Studying the story of Michael and Sophia taught me that my experience as a refugee, my knowledge of multiple cultures, and my determination to overcome obstacles could be exactly the assets European companies needed to expand globally." Another powerful testimonial came from an Australian Indigenous entrepreneur who had used adaptations of the Chen-Peterson principles to create a business connecting traditional Aboriginal knowledge with modern sustainable agriculture technologies. Michael and Sophia proved that ancient traditions and modern innovations aren't opposites, they're complements. "My company exists because I learned from them that my cultural heritage wasn't something to overcome, but something to celebrate and apply." Over the 90 years following that first call, the impact of the Chen-Peterson principles continued to grow and evolve. New generations of leaders adapted and refined the original methodologies, applying them to emerging challenges like ethical artificial intelligence, climate change, and digital globalization. A century after the original call, the Chen-Peterson methodology had been integrated into the leadership curricula of over 500 universities worldwide, applied by more than 10,000 businesses, and used by governmental and non-governmental organizations on every inhabited continent. During a centennial commemorative conference, the central theme was the next century, how the Chen-Peterson principles can address future challenges. Michael and Sophia lived in an era of simpler communication, but the principles they developed are timeless, said the keynote speaker, an expert in future leadership. Courage, authenticity, and commitment to human potential will be just as relevant in the next 100 years as they were in the last 100. The discussions at the Centennial Conference focused on how to apply Chen-Peterson principles to challenges Michael and Sophia could never have imagined. Work teams composed of humans and artificial intelligence, businesses operating simultaneously in the physical world and virtual realities, and societies navigating tensions between cultural preservation and technological innovation. The brilliance of the Chen-Peterson principles is that they're based on fundamental human nature, not specific technologies, observed a futurism researcher during one of the sessions. No matter how the world changes, we'll still need courage to see potential, authenticity to build trust, and persistence to create positive change. During the closing session of the Centennial Conference, the launch of Chen-Peterson Project 2.0 was announced, a global initiative to adapt the original principles to the challenges of the second century. Michael and Sophia started with a phone call that changed 2 lives, said the project director. Project 2.0 begins with a global network of millions committed to applying their principles to tackle humanity's greatest challenges: inequality, climate change, and building truly inclusive societies. The Centennial Project set ambitious goals to apply Chen-Peterson principles in 1,000 cities globally, train 1 million leaders in methodologies based on their teachings, and create a new generation of businesses and organizations grounded in inclusion and sustainability. 3 years after the launch of Project 2.0, preliminary results suggested the Centennial goals were not just ambitious, but achievable. Cities across all continents had implemented programs based on Chen-Peterson principles to better integrate diverse communities. Businesses of all sizes were applying adapted methodologies to create more inclusive and innovative workplaces. One of the most innovative applications took place in Singapore, where the government had used Chen-Peterson principles to completely redesign its immigrant integration programs. Instead of trying to make immigrants adapt to our culture, we decided to explore how their cultures could enrich ours, explained the minister overseeing the program. We applied the Chen-Peterson approach: start small, prove it works, and let success inspire expansion. The results of Singapore's program were extraordinary. The city-state saw significant increases in innovation, entrepreneurship, and social cohesion. More importantly, the program became a model other nations studied and adapted to their own contexts. An equally innovative application occurred in Colombia, where a non-governmental organization had used Chen-Peterson principles to integrate former combatants from armed groups into the formal economy. The biggest challenge was overcoming mutual prejudices, explained the organization's director. We applied the Chen-Peterson methodology. We created opportunities for former combatants to demonstrate their leadership, teamwork, and problem-solving skills. When business owners saw practical results, the prejudices began to fade. The Colombian program had been so successful that it was being replicated in other countries facing similar post-conflict reintegration challenges. On the 5th anniversary of Project 2.0, organizers conducted a global assessment that revealed surprising impacts. Over 2,000 cities had implemented some form of Chen-Peterson-based programs. More than 2 million leaders had received training in related methodologies. Tens of thousands of businesses and organizations had adopted practices based on their teachings. The numbers are impressive, but what moves me most are the individual stories, said the director during the results presentation. Every statistic represents a person who had the courage to reveal their potential, or a leader who dared to bet on someone others would overlook. One of the most touching stories came from a school in an inner-city neighborhood in New York City, where teachers had used adaptations of Chen Peterson principles to transform students labeled troublemakers into student leaders. "We applied the exact original approach," explained the school's principal. "Instead of seeing disruptive behavior as a problem, we began viewing it as misdirected leadership. When we created the right opportunities for these students to channel their energy, they became the most engaged and successful learners." The school had documented dramatic improvements in academic performance, reductions in violence, and increased college aspirations among students previously considered lost causes. Another impactful story came from a tech company in Kenya, where the application of Chen Peterson principles had led to the creation of innovative solutions for local challenges. "And we had brilliant engineers who hid their knowledge of traditional farming because they thought it wasn't relevant to modern technology," explained the CEO. "When we applied the Chen Peterson approach and created space for them to share this knowledge, we developed agricultural apps that are revolutionizing farming in East Africa." The Kenyan company had become a regional leader in agrotech, developing solutions that blended traditional wisdom with modern technologies in ways that benefited both local farmers and the national economy. 10 years after the launch of Project 2.0, a new generation of leaders who had grown up learning about Michael and Sophia since childhood was stepping into prominent roles in businesses, governments, and organizations around the world. These young leaders, nicknamed the Chen Peterson generation, brought a natural perspective on inclusion and diversity that their predecessors had to learn. For them, seeing potential in different people wasn't a special skill. It was simply the normal way of operating. Emily Rodriguez, a 28-year-old Mexican-American CEO running an ethical AI startup, exemplified this new generation. "I grew up hearing Michael and Sophia's story as an example of how to lead," Emily said in an interview. "For my generation, the idea of not valuing diversity is as strange as the idea of not using technology. It's just part of how we do business." Emily's startup had developed AI algorithms specifically designed to eliminate biases and promote more inclusive decisions, applying Chen Peterson principles to technologies Michael and Sophia could never have imagined. "Michael and Sophia faced human biases," Emily explained. "Our generation faces algorithmic biases. But the principles for fighting both are the same: transparency, accountability, and a genuine commitment to fairness." Another member of the Chen Peterson generation was Jason Lee Smith, the grandson of Chinese immigrants who had become Canada's youngest Minister of Technological Innovation. "Michael and Sophia's story taught me that my bicultural heritage wasn't a complication in my identity. It was my top qualification for leading in a globalized world," Jason said during his inauguration speech. Under his leadership, Canada had launched innovative programs to attract and develop diverse tech talent, using modern adaptations of Chen Peterson principles to create what many considered the world's most inclusive tech ecosystem. The Chen Peterson generation also included leaders like Layla Al-Mansour, a British-Iraqi engineer who revolutionized the renewable energy sector by applying traditional Middle Eastern water management knowledge to modern solar technologies. "Michael and Sophia proved that ancient traditions and modern innovations can work together," Layla said at a sustainability conference. "My company exists because I learned from them that my cultural heritage wasn't extra baggage, it was specialized knowledge the modern world desperately needs." 15 years after Project 2.0, the influence of the Chen Peterson generation had grown so significant that political and economic analysts began studying their collective impact on global leadership. This generation grew up assuming diversity is an advantage, not a challenge, observed a leadership researcher from the Wharton School of Business. As a result, they're creating organizations and societies that are naturally more inclusive, innovative, and resilient. The impact of the Chen Peterson generation was particularly visible in how they approached global crises. During the global pandemic of 2035, leaders trained in Chen Peterson principles consistently outperformed their peers in international coordination, inclusion of marginalized communities in crisis responses, and the development of innovative solutions that considered diverse cultural perspectives. Leaders shaped by Chen Peterson principles intuitively understood that global crises require solutions that honor both scientific expertise and local traditional knowledge. Noted a crisis response analyst. They didn't see this as a tension, they saw it as an opportunity for creative synthesis. 20 years after Project 2.0, the 120th anniversary of the first call in Mandarin was marked by a week-long global celebration with simultaneous events in every capital city worldwide. The theme of the celebration was 120 Years of Transformation, the future of Chen Peterson principles, focusing on how the original lessons of Michael and Sophia would remain relevant for the decades ahead. During the opening ceremony, broadcast globally and watched by over 1 billion people, the current president of the Chen Peterson Global Network, great-granddaughter of Kevin Zhang, reflected on the extraordinary legacy of a simple phone call. Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen could never have imagined that a decision made in a moment of surprise would become the foundation for transformations lasting more than a century, she said, before a global audience. But perhaps that's the real magic of their story. It proves that every one of us at any moment has the power to make decisions that can change the world. Throughout the celebration week, the results of a global study tracking the economic and social impact of Chen Peterson principles over 120 years were announced. The numbers were staggering. Businesses applying methodologies based on these principles had generated trillions of dollars in additional economic value. Societies that had adopted approaches inspired by their teachings showed significantly higher levels of social cohesion, innovation, and overall well-being. But the numbers, as impressive as they are, don't capture the true impact, observed the study's lead researcher. The real legacy of Michael and Sophia is that they fundamentally changed how humanity thinks about potential, diversity, and possibility. They proved that doing good and doing well are one and the same. At the closing ceremony, the launch of Chen Peterson Project 3.0 was announced, an even more ambitious initiative for the next 120 years. Michael and Sophia started with a simple question. What if we saw differences as advantages, said the new project's director. Project 3.0 begins with an equally simple question. What if we applied these principles to tackle the greatest challenges humanity will face in the coming centuries? Project 3.0 set goals that seemed nearly impossible, eliminating systemic discrimination globally, creating truly sustainable and inclusive societies, and preparing humanity for future challenges like space colonization, extended lifespans, and coexistence with advanced artificial intelligence. It may seem impossible, the director admitted, but Michael and Sophia taught us that impossible change begins with courageous people, making the right choices at critical moments. If millions applied Chen Peterson courage to their daily decisions, there's no limit to what we can achieve. 5 years after the launch of Project 3.0, early results suggested these ambitious goals were not utopian fantasies, but achievable targets through the persistent application of proven principles. In dozens of countries, governments had implemented policies based on Chen Peterson methodologies that resulted in dramatic reductions in inequality, increases in social mobility, and improvements in community cohesion. In the private sector, a new generation of companies had been founded specifically on Chen Peterson principles, creating business models that were simultaneously highly profitable and deeply committed to social justice and environmental sustainability. We're seeing the emergence of a new kind of capitalism, observed an economist studying these companies. A capitalism that understands long-term profit, requires inclusion, sustainability, and genuine contribution to social well-being. In education, curricula based on Chen Peterson principles had been implemented in thousands of schools globally, creating a generation of young people who naturally saw diversity as a strength, collaboration as superior to competition, and social responsibility as an integral part of personal success. Children educated in Chen Peterson principles show higher levels of empathy, creativity, and problem-solving skills, reported a longitudinal study. They intuitively understand that global problems require solutions that honor multiple perspectives and diverse expertise. 10 years after Project 3.0, something extraordinary had happened. The application of Chen Peterson principles had become so common and natural that many young people didn't even know there was a time when seeing diversity as an advantage was considered revolutionary. For my generation, the idea of discriminating against someone for their background or appearance is as strange as using horses for transportation, said a 20-year-old during a generational attitude survey. It just doesn't make sense to waste human talent that way. This normalization of Chen Peterson principles represented both a victory and a new challenge. On one hand, it meant the core values of Michael and Sophia had become part of human culture. On the other hand, it created the risk of complacency and losing sight of how much these principles had cost to establish. Every generation must actively choose to live these principles, warned a historian specializing in the Chen Peterson legacy. They don't sustain themselves automatically. They require courage, vigilance, and ongoing commitment from every individual. To address this challenge, the Chen Peterson Global Network established the Living Memory Program, connecting young people with survivors from eras when discrimination was common, ensuring future generations understood both the progress made and the fragility of that progress. 15 years after Project 3.0, on the 135th anniversary of the original call, humanity had achieved milestones that seemed impossible just decades before. Systematic discrimination had been eliminated in over 100 countries. Truly sustainable and inclusive societies existed on every continent. Humanity was preparing for its first multicultural space colony, applying Chen Peterson principles to ensure expansion beyond Earth wouldn't repeat the mistakes of historical colonization. Michael and Sophia planted a seed that grew into a global forest, said the current leader of the global network during the commemorative ceremony. Today, their principles are as fundamental to human civilization as concepts of democracy, human rights, or the scientific method. During the ceremony, it was announced that the story of Michael and Sophia would be included in the first-time capsule sent to the space colony, ensuring future generations of humans, no matter where they lived in the universe, would know the story of how a simple phone call changed the course of human civilization. We want humans living on other planets 1,000 years from now to know that their advanced and inclusive civilization began with two people having the courage to do what was right at a critical moment, explained the director of the space project. The story chosen for the time capsule wasn't just about Michael and Sophia, but about all the people who over 135 years had chosen to apply their principles to their own lives and challenges. The true Chen Peterson story isn't about two extraordinary people, said the narrator, who recorded the official version for the time capsule. It's about millions of ordinary people who chose to be extraordinary through small acts of courage, one decision at a time. The recording included testimonies from people of all ages, backgrounds and professions, each explaining how Michael and Sophia's principles had influenced their own life choices. A farmer from the United States shared how she had applied the principles to integrate indigenous agricultural techniques with modern technology, creating farming methods that were both more productive and sustainable. A Nigerian engineer described how he had used the principles to lead multicultural teams in developing resilient infrastructure for vulnerable communities. A Finnish teacher explained how she had applied the principles to create educational curricula that honored both traditional academic knowledge and diverse cultural wisdom. Each of these stories proves that the Chen Peterson principles aren't just abstract philosophy, concluded the narrator. They're practical tools anyone can use to create positive change in their own sphere of influence. 20 years after Project 3.0, on the 140th anniversary of the original call, something unprecedented happened. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered to sign the Chen Peterson Universal Declaration, a document formalizing the global commitment to the principles Michael and Sophia had developed. The declaration wasn't just symbolic. It established practical standards for how nations, businesses, and organizations should apply principles of inclusion, diversity, and human potential development. This declaration represents the formal recognition that the Chen-Peterson principles aren't just good business practices, they're fundamental requirements for a just and prosperous civilization, said the UN Secretary-General during the signing ceremony. The document was signed in an exact replica of the office where Michael had first heard Sophia speaking Chinese, creating a symbolic connection between that individual moment 140 years ago and the global collective commitment of the present. Michael and Sophia proved that monumental change begins with courageous personal decisions, said the last person to sign the declaration, who was the current president of the Chen-Peterson Global Network. Today, leaders from every nation are making their own courageous decisions to ensure their principles guide our civilization for the next 140 years. The signing ceremony was followed by a week of global celebrations, including exhibitions on the history of the Chen-Peterson principles, conferences on future applications, and cultural festivals showcasing how different societies had adapted the principles to their own contexts. During one of the exhibitions, visitors could listen to a recording of the original phone call, discovered decades earlier in the telephone company's archives. The recording of Sophia speaking Chinese with her grandmother, followed by the surprising conversation with Michael, had become one of humanity's most treasured historical artifacts. "Hearing this recording gives me chills every time," said one exhibition visitor. "It's incredible to think that this casual 3-minute conversation changed the course of human history." Another popular artifact in the exhibition was the original phone Sophia had used, now carefully preserved as a symbol of how simple technologies can facilitate transformative connections. "This phone represents more than communication," explained the exhibition curator. "It represents the importance of being open to unexpected moments that can change everything." 25 years after Project 3.0, on the 145th anniversary of the original call, humanity celebrated another extraordinary milestone. The first generation of humans born and raised in the space colony had established their own society based entirely on Chen-Peterson principles. The colony, officially called New Earth, but affectionately known as Chen-Peterson World, had become a living demonstration of how a society could function when built from the ground up on foundations of inclusion, diversity, and human potential development. "We didn't have to overcome centuries of prejudice and discriminatory systems," explained the colony leader during a broadcast to Earth. "We were able to start from scratch, applying Chen-Peterson principles from day one. The result is a society that works better than anything that ever existed on Earth." The colony had developed governance, economic, and educational systems entirely based on maximizing each individual's potential, regardless of their background, appearance, or specific abilities. On New Earth, the question isn't whether someone can contribute, but how we can discover and develop their unique contributions, said a young person born in the colony during an interview. The success of the space colony inspired similar experiments on Earth, with several cities deciding to rebuild their social and economic systems using New Earth as a model. "If they can make it work in space, we can certainly make it work here," said the mayor of a European city that had become the first Earth metropolis to fully implement systems based on Chen-Peterson principles. 30 years after Project 3.0, on the 150th anniversary of the original call, something extraordinary was announced. Digital archaeologists had discovered and restored complete audio recordings of several conversations between Michael and Sophia during their early years. Working together, the recordings, found in backups of old security systems, offered an intimate window into how two ordinary individuals had developed principles that changed human civilization. In one of the most touching recordings, Michael and Sophia discussed their doubts about whether they were making the right choices. "Sophia, sometimes I wonder if we're being naive to believe that doing the right thing will work in the business world," said Michael's voice, clearly younger. "Michael, maybe naivety is exactly what the business world needs," Sophia replied. "Maybe it's time to prove that it's possible to be successful and good at the same time." The recordings revealed that Michael and Sophia had faced far more doubts and obstacles than the official stories suggested, making their achievements even more inspiring. Hearing these conversations makes me realize they were ordinary people facing ordinary problems, said a young leader after listening to the recordings. It gives me the courage to apply the same principles to my own challenges. The recordings were made publicly available and quickly became one of the most popular podcast series in history, heard by billions of people in hundreds of languages. These recordings prove that greatness doesn't come from being fearless. It comes from doing what's right despite fear, observed a cultural analyst. Michael and Sophia had the same doubts we all do. The difference is that they chose to persist. The recordings also revealed moments of humor and humanity that made Michael and Sophia even more relatable to modern audiences. In one particularly amusing conversation, Michael confessed to Sophia that he had spent years trying to learn Chinese on his own after discovering she spoke the language. "Sophia, I have to confess something. I've been secretly studying Chinese for 2 years. I thought it would be impressive if I could speak to your business partners in their language," Michael said. "Michael, that's so sweet, but your pronunciation is terrible," Sophia replied, laughing. "How about I give you some proper lessons?" These authentic human interactions only strengthened the emotional connection people around the world felt with Michael and Sophia, proving that transformational leaders don't need to be perfect. They just need to be genuine. 40 years. After Project 3.0, on the 160th anniversary of the original call, humanity had achieved something once thought impossible. A global civilization where discrimination based on origin, appearance, or abilities had become not just illegal, but culturally unthinkable. We've reached a point where children grow up without even understanding concepts like racism or sexism, reported an anthropological study. To them, these ideas are as strange as human sacrifice or slavery are to us. This cultural transformation had been so complete that museums were established specifically to educate young people about how the world worked before the universal application of the Chen-Peterson principles. It's hard for today's youth to grasp that there was a time when people were judged by their looks instead of their character, said a museum educator. They find it as irrational as we find the idea that the earth is flat. The most popular museum featured an exact recreation of the office, where Michael had heard Sophia speaking Chinese, allowing visitors to experience the moment that changed human history. "Being in this space makes me feel the responsibility we all have to recognize transformative moments in our own lives," said a teenage visitor. Michael and Sophia didn't know they were changing the world. They just did the right thing at the right time. During the 160th anniversary celebration, it was announced that Michael and Sophia's story had been selected as the first human story to be transmitted to other galaxies through humanity's interstellar communication program. "When other intelligent civilizations receive our first message, we want it to be about our finest values and aspirations," explained the program director. The Chen-Peterson story represents the very best of humanity: courage, compassion, and the ability to turn differences into strengths. The intergalactic message included not only Michael and Sophia's story, but also examples of how their principles had been applied by millions over 160 years, painting a portrait of humanity as a species that had learned to value diversity and individual potential. "This message isn't just about Michael and Sophia," said the Earth ambassador responsible for interstellar communications. "It's about a species that chose to evolve beyond primitive prejudices and embrace the strength that comes from genuine diversity." 50 years after Project 3.0, on the 170th anniversary of the original call, something unprecedented happened. The first response from an extraterrestrial civilization was received, and it specifically mentioned the Chen-Peterson story. The message, decoded by linguists and scientists over several months, expressed admiration for the principles Michael and Sophia had developed and revealed that the alien civilization had faced similar challenges related to integrating diversity into their own societies. "Through Michael and Sophia, you have discovered what our civilization took millennia to learn," that true strength comes from unity through diversity, not uniformity through conformity. Read part of the translated message. The alien response globally validated the Chen-Peterson principles, proving they were not just human values, but universal principles necessary for any advanced civilization. Receiving confirmation from a more advanced civilization that we are on the right path is an extraordinary validation of Michael and Sophia's legacy, said the lead scientist in charge of interstellar communication. The alien civilization also shared their own stories of individuals who had made choices similar to Michael and Sophia's, suggesting that transformative moments driven by individual courage might be a universal trait of intelligent species that achieve social harmony. This implies Michael and Sophia were not unique only in human history, but represent a type of leadership that emerges in any society ready to evolve beyond primitive prejudices, observed a xenosociologist. The exchange with the alien civilization led to the development of new programs based on Chen-Peterson principles, specifically designed for interstellar communication and collaboration. We are applying the same principles Michael and Sophia used to navigate earthly cultural differences, to navigate differences between entirely different species, explained the director of the Interstellar Diplomacy Program. 60 years after Project 3.0, on the 180th anniversary of the original call, humanity celebrated something even the most visionary minds could not have imagined. An intergalactic federation based on Chen-Peterson principles had been established with 5 different civilizations. Michael and Sophia began by applying principles of inclusion to an American company, said the first human ambassador to the Intergalactic Federation. Today, those same principles are being used to coordinate collaboration between species that evolved in completely different solar systems. The Federation had developed communication protocols, trade and space exploration standards based on respecting and valuing the unique differences each civilization brought to the collective collaboration. Each species has perspectives and abilities the others do not, explained a Federation member through universal translators. By applying Chen-Peterson principles on a galactic scale, we've achieved scientific and cultural advancements no civilization could have accomplished alone. The success of the Intergalactic Federation inspired speculation about even broader applications of Chen-Peterson principles for future challenges, such as interdimensional travel, communication with energy-based life forms, and collaboration with artificial intelligences that had evolved beyond human comprehension. The principles Michael and Sophia developed to integrate human cultures seem to apply to any situation where different types of intelligence must collaborate, noted a civilization theorist. This suggests they uncovered something fundamental about the nature of intelligent cooperation in the universe. 70 years after Project 3.0, on the 190th anniversary of the original call, preparations began for an unprecedented celebration, the bicentennial of the call that had changed the course of civilization. The preparations for the bicentennial involved not just Earth and its space colonies, but all civilizations of the Intergalactic Federation, each contributing their own perspectives on how the Chen-Peterson principles had influenced their development. The bicentennial won't just be a human celebration, announced the organizing committee. It will be an intergalactic celebration of the universal principles of inclusion, courage, and potential development that Michael and Sophia helped uncover. One of the allied civilizations had created a form of temporal art that allowed viewers to experience historical events as if they were present. For the bicentennial, they recreated the exact moment of Sophia's original call, enabling beings of different species to experience the transformative moment. Letting other species live the original Chen-Peterson moment is fostering a deeper understanding of how small individual choices can have universal consequences, reported an intergalactic anthropologist. Another allied civilization had developed technology that could trace the consequences of individual decisions across multiple temporal dimensions. Their analysis of Sophia's original call revealed that the moment had created waves of positive change extending far beyond the reality humanity knew. Michael's decision to see Sophia's call as an opportunity rather than a problem created positive ramifications across trillions of alternate timelines, reported the dimensional scientist. It may be the only individual decision in recorded history with universally positive consequences across all possible realities. 80 years after Project 3.0, in the year of the original call's bicentennial, the celebration that took place was truly universal in scope. Billions of beings from hundreds of different species participated in synchronized events lasting an entire galactic year. Today, we celebrate not just Michael Peterson and Sophia Chen, but the universal principle they embodied, that every encounter between intelligent beings is an opportunity for mutual enrichment, said the leader of the Intergalactic Federation during the opening ceremony. The celebration included the unveiling of the Chen-Peterson Universal Memorial, a space station collaboratively built by all civilizations of the Federation, located at the central gravitational point between their solar systems. The memorial housed archives of every known application of the Chen-Peterson principles over 2 centuries, from Michael's original company to modern intergalactic collaborations. Visitors could study how the same core principles had been adapted to entirely different contexts while preserving their essence. This memorial proves that Michael and Sophia discovered something truly universal, said the project's lead architect. Principles that work just as well for integrating human cultures on Earth as for coordinating civilizations separated by light years. At the climax of the bicentennial celebration, an announcement was made that surprised even the organizers. An extremely advanced civilization from a distant galaxy had sent a message specifically to honor Michael and Sophia. Through millions of years of evolution and galactic exploration, our civilization has found only 3 principles that are truly universal for intelligent cooperation, the message read. Your ancestors, Michael and Sophia, rediscovered all 3 through a simple interaction: the courage to see potential, the authenticity to build trust, and the persistence to create positive change. The message went on to explain that this ancient civilization had chosen to share advanced knowledge specifically because humanity and its allies had demonstrated genuine commitment to these universal principles. You have proven through 2 centuries of consistent application that you are worthy of wisdom we typically share only with civilizations that took millions of years to discover what you learned from Michael and Sophia, concluded the message. The knowledge shared by the ancient civilization included technologies for instant travel between galaxies, universal telepathic communication, and methods for converting pure energy into complex matter. Receiving this knowledge is the ultimate validation that Michael and Sophia didn't just change human history, said the leader of the Federation. They set our species on a path that qualifies us for universal wisdom. With the knowledge from the ancient civilization, the Intergalactic Federation rapidly expanded to include civilizations from other galaxies, always applying Chen-Peterson principles to ensure that expansion strengthened diversity rather than creating uniformity. 3 centuries after the original call, descendants of Michael and Sophia led expeditions into parallel dimensions, applying the same core principles to establish communication with life forms existing in completely different physical realities. No matter how exotic or incomprehensible a life form may seem, said the dimensional leader, who carried DNA from both Michael and Sophia through generations of descendants, the principles of courage, authenticity, and persistence always build bridges of understanding. 5 centuries after the original call, the Chen-Peterson principles had become the foundation for the first Universal Constitution, a document governing interactions among all known intelligent life forms, regardless of their dimensional, temporal, or physical origins. Michael and Sophia planted a seed that grew into a tree whose fruits nourish all intelligent life in the known universe, said the first Universal President during the Constitution's ratification ceremony. A millennium after the original call, when humanity and its allies had spread across thousands of galaxies and established communication with millions of different species, the story of Michael and Sophia was still told as the defining example of how transformative change begins. 13. In 1,000 years of universal expansion, we've encountered many stories of courage and transformation, said a Universal historian during the millennial celebration, but the story of Michael and Sophia remains unique because it shows how two ordinary people, facing an ordinary moment, made choices that shaped the destiny of all intelligent life. The original phone call had been preserved in a form of pure energy that could be experienced by any kind of consciousness, regardless of physical form. Billions of beings from thousands of different species had lived that moment, each drawing lessons relevant to their own forms of existence. It doesn't matter if you're carbon-based, silicon-based, pure energy, or quantum consciousness, observed a universal philosopher. The original Chen Peterson moment teaches truths that are relevant to any life form capable of moral choice. 10,000 years after the original call, when the classification human had become just one of thousands of categories in a universal network of cooperative consciousnesses, the Chen Peterson principles still guided decisions on how to integrate newly discovered life forms. Michael and Sophia taught us that every new type of consciousness we encounter is an opportunity for mutual enrichment, said a consciousness explorer who had evolved far beyond the original human form. Vertinder, this principle allowed us to build a universal civilization based on collaboration rather than domination. The known universe had become a place where countless different life forms worked together harmoniously, each contributing unique perspectives and abilities for the collective good. This universal paradise of cooperative diversity existed because 10,000 years earlier, a housekeeper had the courage to answer a phone in Chinese in front of her employer, and he had the courage to see it as an opportunity rather than a problem. The Chen Peterson story proves that in the universe, as in individual lives, the most important moments are often those that seem the most ordinary, concluded the last known record of Michael and Sophia before their individual identities merged into the universal collective consciousness. They taught us that every interaction is a chance to choose cooperation over conflict, inclusion over exclusion, and possibility over limitation. That is true immortality, not living forever but creating principles that live forever. And so a simple phone call in Chinese, answered by a courageous housekeeper and responded to by an open-minded businessman, became the foundation upon which all intelligent life in the universe learned to collaborate, thrive, and evolve together. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere thoughts in the comments. Do you think Michael made the right choice by betting on Sophia? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.